Hey truckers, welcome to part 2 of Reincarnation of the Businesswoman at School. Let's dive into the video. Though he didn't like Gu Ning, he couldn't accept the fact that the girl, who had loved him so much, would ignore him suddenly. Qin Jing was a selfish boy. He enjoyed being admired, and he was proud of himself being popular. The minute Gu Ning walked into the classroom, Xiao Feifei looked at her unkindly. Honestly, Gu Ning was so sick of it. Yu Mixi immediately asked Gu Ning when she sat down, "Gu Ning, how's everything going?" "Very well," Gu Ning replied. The first class was English class. The teacher unexpectedly found fault with Gu Ning. Gu Ning knew the teacher did it on purpose for a reason. It was said that their English teacher, Chen Ming, was Chen Ziyao's uncle. Chen Ziyao must have told Chen Ming to pick on Gu Ning. "Gu Ning, translate this sentence into English," Chen Ming said. Gu Ning was well known for her poor English. Chen Ming deliberately asked her to translate a whole paragraph. Even the student with the highest level of English in their class wouldn't be able to that. If one could translate 2/3, he or she would do a fantastic job already. Thus, everyone knew Chen Ming was intentionally finding fault with Gu Ning. Although not knowing the reason, Xiao Feifei and her friends were all pleased to see that. However, Gu Ning stood up calmly with confidence. A paragraph of authentic English came out from Gu Ning's mouth, which shocked everyone. Even Chen Ming, who was the English teacher, couldn't do the same. Gu Ning was poor in English before, but now, Gu Ning was different. English was her second language because she had received the training abroad in her last incarnation. In a foreign country for 10 years, it was fair enough that she could speak authentic English. If you didn't look at her face, you would mistake her for a native English speaker. After the shock, Xiao Feifei and her friends were utterly upset with envy and jealousy. Why? How come Gu Ning's English became so good? Chen Ming wore a displeased face. He now felt he had embarrassed himself. He had intended to pick on Gu Ning and remain decent at the same time. Though he was unhappy, he had to admit that Gu Ning had done a better job than him. So, he gave up his plan afterwards to save face. After the class, Yu Mixi looked at Gu Ning with great admiration and excitement. "Gu Ning, I have no idea that your English is so good. I can teach you if you want," Gu Ning said. "Of course, please." Yu Mixi was thrilled, because her English was poor as well. So what? The poor girl is always the poor girl, no matter how good her English is. Xiao Feifei couldn't stand that Gu Ning had won again. In her eyes, a poor girl could never change her fate. Exactly, Yang Yulu and Wu Qingya agreed. They had been with Xiao Feifei for too long to have a clear understanding of themselves. Gu Ning didn't care at all, while Yu Mixi felt attacked. The minute Chen Ming went back to his office, he sent a message to Chen Ziyao saying Gu Ning's English was too good to pick on. Chen Ziyao received the message, feeling irritated and disappointed, but Chen Ming clearly told her it wouldn't work, so she had to give up. The afternoon classes passed quickly. Before Gu Ning and Yu Mixi left their classroom, Mu Ke was already standing outside waiting for them, along with noisy discussions from many girls. "Wow, he's Mu Ke from the first classroom. Why is he here? Is he here for a girl in our class? Who will she be? I'm jealous. Exactly, I hope he's here for me. In your dreams. You're definitely not his type." Though Mu Ke wasn't the most handsome boy in their school, he was outstanding enough. He was good at studying and basketball, plus a great family background, thus he was famous in 12th grade. "Mu Ke, who are you here for?" Gu Ning and Yu Mixi went outside. Meanwhile, Xiao Feifei walked to Mu Ke and asked him the question. Xiao Feifei looked shy. She now was nothing like the arrogant girl in normal days. Gu Ning instantly knew Xiao Feifei liked Mu Ke. Unfortunately, Mu Ke didn't like her. I'm here for, Mu Ke wasn't arrogant, nor gentle, but he treated others with good manners. Thus he didn't ignore Xiao Feifei's question. But before he could answer the question, he saw Gu Ning and Yu Mixi coming out. He immediately walked to them and left Xiao Feifei alone. "Hey boss, Mixi, let's go dine together." "Boss?" Everyone around was astonished, and their eyes all rounded in surprise. They glanced at Mu Ke, then Gu Ning. What? Boss? Why did Mu Ke call Gu Ning boss? What was going on? Let's go! Gu Ning ignored everyone who was in shock, and left with Mu Ke together with Yu Mixi. After Gu Ning and her friends were gone for a while, everyone then got their mind back and started to gossip. What? Did I hear it right? Mu Ke called Gu Ning his boss? You've heard it right, because we all have heard it. 7 sit n dot c/m for l test vels. But, it's so unreal. What has happened? Who knows? Does Mu Ke like Gu Ning? Though Gu Ning is poor, she is pretty. Then why did Mu Ke call her his boss? Probably it's their way of romance. At the same time, Xiao Feifei was more than annoyed. She yelled to herself in her heart with anger. She liked Mu Ke so much. Why would the boy choose Gu Ning? Gu Ning was nobody. She was merely a poor girl and wasn't qualified to compare with Xiao Feifei. Obviously, Xiao Feifei believed Mu Ke admired Gu Ning. She wouldn't accept the fact, and she was determined to pay Gu Ning back. But, who would be the one to pay for it was still an unclear answer. Gu Ning apparently wasn't the one. Gu Ning couldn't care less about how people might gossip. 3 of them went straight to the second floor. This meal was on Mu Ke as well. Yu Mixi felt a little uncomfortable, but Gu Ning was totally at ease. Qin Jing, Zhang Yiming, Fu Mingliang, Gu Xiaoxiao and Chen Ziao were all rich kids. They all came to the private cafeteria to eat. When Gu Ning and her friends arrived, the 2 groups met each other. Seeing Mu Ke was with Gu Ning, Qin Jing and his friends were all in shock. After the shock, Zhang Yiming opened his mouth with intense dislike. Mu Ke, why are you with her? The most up-to-date NVELs are published on n0velg.n.co/m. The her word had been stressed with discrimination. Hearing this, Mu Ke frowned with dissatisfaction in his eyes. It's none of your business that I'm with whom, Mu Ke replied unfriendly. Fu Mingliang immediately shouted in surprise, Jesus, do you like Gu Ning? How is it possible? She's a poor girl. She can never be with you. Apparently, Fu Mingliang also believed Mu Ke liked Gu Ning. To which, he didn't want to hide his dislike at all. Shut your mouth. Mu Ke was annoyed. Gu Ning was his boss, and an extremely important figure in his heart. He couldn't tolerate someone else attack her before his face. Mu Ke looked coldly at Fu Mingliang. He was likely to fight. Fu Mingliang, if you dare to say something like that, I'll beat you. Mu Ke's behavior successfully irritated Fu Mingliang. He shouted angrily to Mu Ke, what is wrong with you? Do you really want to beat your brothers for that girl? Fu Mingliang's shout attracted people around them. Interesting, Mu Ke laughed in a sarcastic way, I honestly don't want to make friends with you. You're a bunch of bullies who enjoy humiliating an innocent classmate. You all rely on your parents to live a wealthy, glorious life. And you're proud of it? Shame on you. Try to be independent sometimes. Mu Ke had attacked them all and raised dissatisfaction among them. Chen Ziao opened her mouth first because she still remembered that Gu Ning had slapped her face yesterday. She said, what's wrong with us calling her a poor girl? She is a poor girl. And what's wrong with us relying on our parents? That's because we all have a wealthy and powerful family. Exactly, she is born poor. That's pathetic. Gu Xiaoxiao immediately followed. Mu Ke, how about you then? You are running a jewelry store now. Didn't you ask your parents for money? Fu Mingliang was displeased, and he was jealous as well. Yes, he was being jealous. Although Fu Mingliang had no interest in a startup and he had no intention to work hard, he was still jealous of Mu Ke's profitable business. He didn't want Mu Ke to be better than him. Knowing this, Gu Ning was surprised. She didn't expect Mu Ke would start up a business at such a young age. A jewelry store, it seemed she had encountered her peer. So what? At least my family only helped me with money, that's all. Mu Ke wasn't showing off. He was telling the truth. Gu Ning supported Mu Ke in her heart. She had to admit that Mu Ke was a boy of determination and ability. If it was possible, she even wanted to cooperate with him. Fu Mingliang was still displeased, but he knew the fact as well. All of a sudden, he couldn't argue back. Fu Mingliang gave up, while Gu Xiaoxiao continued, Gu Ning, yesterday, you said you would be rich. Does it mean that you found yourself a rich boyfriend like Mu Ke? Well, Mu Ke indeed is from a rich family. However, you can never marry into such a rich family. Moo-Koo will dump you sooner or later. Then, God bless you won't end up like your mother who was pregnant when she was just a freshman and had been dumped by a man and dropped out of school. Now she. Ah. Before Gu Xiaoxiao could finish, she screamed out loud, which shocked everyone in the canteen. Especially those who were standing around her, they almost went deaf by the scream. Now, right on Gu Xiaoxiao's head was an upside-down plate. The food and oil were sliding down along her hair, face and clothes. Gu Xiaoxiao had egg on her face. At the same time, everyone was staring at Gu Ning in shock. They all saw clearly that Gu Ning had thrown the plate straight to Gu Xiaoxiao. The plate even had turned several circles in the air, then right fell on Gu Xiaoxiao's head. Was this a coincidence? No, it couldn't be. Could Gu Ning do kung fu? Thinking of that, most people looked at Gu Ning in a different way, especially those who were kung fu lovers. Wow, boss, you're so awesome. I want to learn this move. Moo-Koo raised his voice with excitement. He admired Gu Ning now more than ever. Boss? The crowd was shocked once more. Moo-Koo called Gu Ning his boss? What was going on? Gu Ning ignored Moo-Koo, fixing her eyes on Gu Xiaoxiao with coldness. She warned, Gu Xiaoxiao, shut your smelly mouth. If you dare to say another word to humiliate my mother, I'll beat you to the ground. What the F***ck? Gu Ning, I'm going to kill you. Gu Xiaoxiao wouldn't listen to Gu Ning's warning. She went crazy now, and ran to Gu Ning. The plate on her head fell down on the floor at the same time. Gu Ning sneered. She casually pulled a table nearby to her front. Then, Gu Xiaoxiao hit straight on the table. The crowd was shocked for the third time. The table was heavy. How could Gu Ning easily move it? Now, everyone believed Gu Ning must be a master of kung fu. Gu Xiaoxiao was Qin Zheng's girlfriend. Seeing Gu Xiaoxiao had been treated so badly, he felt embarrassed as well. He had to stand up for Gu Xiaoxiao now. Gu Ning, you're going too far, he criticized. Saying this, he instantly went to help Gu Xiaoxiao stand up. Interesting, Gu Ning sneered again. She looked at him in a meaningful way. Really? Compared with what you've done to me, am I really going too far? If you don't mind, I'm willing to tell the facts to everyone here, and let the crowd be the judge. Gu Ning had no intention to continue actually. However, since those people wouldn't leave her alone, she decided to fight till the end. Qin Zheng was cornered. He absolutely knew what they had done to Gu Ning. What had they done to Gu Ning? Insiders all knew what Gu Ning was pointing to, but those outsiders were all curious about what had happened. The glances of curiosity moved around among Gu Ning, Gu Xiaoxiao and Qin Zheng. Moo-Koo was an insider, while Mixi knew half of the truth. Both of them were mad. Let bygones be bygones. You're fine now anyway. Qin Zheng was worried that Gu Ning would tell the truth. Gu Ning felt like laughing. She argued him back with the same theory. In that case, what has happened just then can also be forgiven, right? Then, Qin Zheng had no reason to blame her. Qin Zheng was dissatisfied, but wasn't able to argue back. Gu Xiaoxiao, on the contrary, felt aggrieved. It was impossible that she would forgive Gu Ning. Gu Ning, you dare to throw the plate to me. You can never get away with it. Gu Xiaoxiao said with obvious hatred, throwing a plate on a table to Gu Ning directly. They stood so close. There was no way to stop it. Everyone was watching the plate flying to Gu Ning. Though Gu Ning had shown her ability just then, others were still worried that Gu Ning wouldn't be able to escape away from the plate, because the distance was so short. However, before everyone could see it clearly, bam, the plate was broken. All of them were amazed by the scene before them. Gu Ning even hit the plate, which was quickly flying to her, with a fist. The plate was hit broken afterwards, while Gu Ning's hands stayed the same. Wow, holy awesome! Moo-Koo looked at Gu Ning with admiration. He couldn't describe how much he admired Gu Ning now. Everyone acclaimed as well. Gu Xiaoxiao was literally scared this time. She stepped backwards at once, staring at Gu Ning in horror, like she was looking at a beast. How come? How was it possible? Since when Gu Ning had become so powerful? Gu Xiaoxiao, I've warned you yesterday to stay away from me. You didn't listen. Since you won't leave me alone, I'm willing to have a little fun, Gu Ning said coldly. Gu Xiaoxiao apparently was frightened by Gu Ning. She gave up for now, but still felt displeased. She said viciously, Gu Ning, I'm going to tell my dad and grandma that you've bullied me. I'll let grandma kick you all out of the old house. I want you all to be homeless. Gu Xiaoxiao was the center in her family. If she insisted, her grandma probably would follow her order. We don't live in the old house for free. We pay the rent. We can live wherever we want after we leave the old house. Gu Ning didn't care at all. She didn't plan to stay in there for much longer anyway. If they were going to move out of the old house today, she and Gu Man would stay in the hotel first. When she came back from City G, she would immediately buy a new house. Boss, you don't need to worry. I can help you find a house, Muku supported Gu Ning. Gu Xiaoxiao was more than annoyed now. She clenched her teeth and said, Fine, very well, Gu Ning, let's go and see. You will regret. Then, she glared at Gu Ning, turning around and left. She even ignored Qin Zheng and other friends. Qin Xiao was also displeased to see that Gu Ning had survived. She glared at Gu Ning too. Qin Zheng, Zhang Yiming and Fu Mingliang were all unhappy. They gave Gu Ning and Muku a meaningful glance, then were gone as well. When they were all gone, the crowd dispersed gradually. Gu Ning and her friends felt disgusted at first, but then cheered up by eating. Your F48 stories on /o/v/lbn.cm. Gu Xiaoxiao immediately called her mother after she left. Gu Xiaoxiao's mother, Lin Lijuan, was a pushy woman who cared about her own daughter only. Hearing her daughter had been bullied, Lin Lijuan was in a rage. Gu Xiaoxiao added fuel on flames. She told her mother that Gu Ning had picked up a rich boy, behaved immorally and so forth. Lin Lijuan hung up the phone. She instantly sent the driver to pick Gu Xiaoxiao up. Then she called Gu Man to humiliate and blame her for a long time. Lin Lijuan demanded Gu Man that she should let Gu Ning apologize to Gu Xiaoxiao, or this would never end. Gu Man was shocked after hearing what had happened. Gu Ning had hit Gu Xiaoxiao by a plate and even had slapped her? Gu Man found it was hard to believe, but since Lin Lijuan called her in person, it could be true. Gu Man, at the same time, assumed it wasn't as bad as what Lin Lijuan had said. Even though Gu Ning had beaten Gu Xiaoxiao, she must have done it because Gu Xiaoxiao had irritated her. Gu Man knew Gu Xiaoxiao so well. Gu Xiaoxiao had bullied Gu Ning for countless times ever since she was a little girl. Though Gu Man knew Gu Ning had been bullied, she didn't know how to deal with it. However, what had scared Gu Man more was that Lin Lijuan said Gu Ning had picked up a rich boy and behaved immorally. She couldn't believe Gu Ning would do that, but teenagers fall in love easily in adolescence. Gu Man was really concerned that Gu Ning would have done something wrong. The minute Gu Man hung up the call from Lin Lijuan, she called Gu Ning at once. When Gu Ning received Gu Man's call, they just arrived at the small forest. Ning Ning, your eldest aunt just called me and said you've hit Xiaoxiao by a plate. You even have slapped her? What has happened? Your eldest aunt also said you must apologize to Xiaoxiao, or this won't end, Gu Man worriedly inquired. Hearing this, Gu Ning wasn't surprised at all. She knew Gu Xiaoxiao would do this. I did throw a plate to her, but it didn't hit her. The plate was simply upside down on her head and ruined her hair, face and clothes. That's all. I didn't beat her neither. She has humiliated me for many times. An upside-down plate wasn't a serious punishment, to be honest, Gu Ning explained calmly. She didn't think she had done anything wrong. And the apologies, I did nothing wrong, so I won't apologize. Gu Ning refused to apologize without hesitation. Gu Man knew Lin Lijuan had exaggerated the facts. Now hearing Gu Ning's explanation, Gu Man believed she was right. Gu Man couldn't help feeling bad after she found out the reason why Gu Ning had thrown the plate out. She blamed herself for being useless, or her daughter wouldn't be bullied that often. A mother would protect her daughter naturally. Although Gu Man still thought Gu Ning had gone too far by throwing the plate, she believed Gu Ning had done nothing wrong. Thus she didn't force Gu Ning to apologize. Ning Ning, you're going to attend the college entrance exam soon. You need to focus on your study, and don't fall in love at such a young age. Gu Man intended to ask Gu Ning whether she had picked up a rich boy, but she was afraid Gu Ning would felt hurt, so Gu Man didn't ask her directly. Gu Ning was a smart girl. She knew the real intention of Gu Man. Gu Xiaoxiao must have badmouthed her behind her back. Mom, I know Gu Xiaoxiao must have told my eldest aunt something bad about me, but Mom, you need to trust me. I'm not the kind of girl who doesn't have sense of self-esteem. Great, I trust you. Though Gu Man was still concerned, she chose to believe Gu Ning. After a while, Gu Ning hung up. They went into a remote part of the small forest, in case others would see them. Training of Kung Fu was a long-term practice. Although Mu Ke had learned several moves, he needed to practice often. Thus Mu Ke and Gu Ning continued to train the way they had done yesterday. As for Mixie, because she wasn't physically strong enough now, she couldn't directly fight with Gu Ning to train and practice. Gu Ning let her do horse stance first. When Gu Ning and her friends were focused on training, a post about her raised a fierce discussion in their school forum. Someone had taken a video of what had just happened in the canteen and uploaded it onto the forum. Gee, this can't be real. The plate has been perfectly thrown ahead. And the table is too heavy to move. How can she easily pull it? The plate as well. How can she hit it broken at once? An ordinary person can never do that. I believe this female student must be a master of Kung Fu. A master of Kung Fu? I don't believe you. You must have read too many action novels, but I have to say this female student is quite somebody. Oh my! I've met this female student before, in the small forest yesterday. She was fighting with another tall strong male student. The boy has been beaten down on the ground. I wanted to take a video of them, but the female student has discovered and threatened me away. Please, tell us what did she say? Please, please, I'm waiting online. Please, please, please. She said, do you want to fight with me? F***ck, I would never risk my life for that, and I ran away in horror. Everyone laughed and teased. There were both complimentary and acid comments. I think she just wants to gain attention. Exactly, people nowadays are eager to be famous. I agree. If she really do Kung Fu, she can have a fight with Chu Pei Han and prove to us. Seeing those acid remarks, those who admired Gu Ning were displeased. They immediately retorted. Are you blind? Try throwing a plate and see if it turns and aims at the target by yourself. And pull the table to move if you can. Exactly, shut your mouth if you can't do it yourself. I think they are being jealous. They just can't stand the fact that Gu Ning is better than them. Can't agree more. Some girls are so jealous of others. Brothers, we need to be clear-sighted and stay away from those girls to protect ourselves. Sure. I prefer to stay single forever rather than be with a pretentious bitch. Agree. Agree. Those boys were so evil. They soon conquered the group of girls who had badmouthed Gu Ning, but secretly guided those girls' anger to Gu Ning. Right at that moment, a comment attracted everyone's attention. Is she really that powerful? I'm Hao Ran, a senior from the 7th classroom. I now challenge this female student to have a fight with me. Anyone who knows this female student, tell me about her. Immediately, the discussion became fiercer. Hao Ran, the senior student from the 7th classroom, was a well-known figure in their school, but he was notorious for his bad behaviors. He had involved himself in fights and riots, behaving even worse than Chu Pei Han. If he hadn't had a powerful background as well, he would have been expelled from the school too. Visit no.v3lb/n.cm for new OVL. Now, Gu Ning was in trouble. Those who had criticized Gu Ning just then instantly added fuel to the fire. Before long, Gu Ning's information was leaked. Whoever had leaked Gu Ning's information must hate her very much and wanted to see her in danger. After Hao Ran had challenged Gu Ning, some felt worried, some looked forward to it, and some just enjoyed building their happiness on others' suffering. There were many students gathered outside the door of the 4th classroom. Soon, Qin Jing, Zhang Yiming, Fu Mingliang and Qin Ziyao were included. They all came for Gu Ning. To be exact, they were here for Hao Ran and Gu Ning. Among those onlookers, Qin Jing and his friends along with Xiao Feifei and her friends were most excited to see what would happen next. If Gu Xiaoxiao had known the news, she must feel regret going home so early and missing the drama. In the passage, 3 boys who were leaning against the guardrails were most noticeable. They weren't good-looking actually, but because no one dared to stay closer to them, they were noticeable then. Although the 3 boys weren't handsome, they weren't ugly at all. They behaved in an arrogant and aggressive way, which showed they were bad boys. Hao ran, Gu Ning probably is too afraid to come. A boy who was standing at the right among those three male students opened his mouth. They were only a few minutes away from the evening class. Gu Ning was still absent. Probably she was frightened. She can't hide forever unless she drops out of school, the boy in the middle, who was Hao Ran, said with disdain. Shall we wait any longer? The evening class is about to begin in a few minutes, a boy who was standing at the left asked. Yes, why not? Probably she intends to come until we're gone when the evening class is about to begin, Hao Ran said. The minute Gu Ning and her friends went out of the stairs, they saw many people around outside of fourth classroom. Something must had happened. No matter what had happened, the evening class was about to begin, and Gu Ning together with Yu Mixi had to walk through. Muku's classroom wasn't in the same direction of Gu Ning's, but out of curiosity, he followed Gu Ning walking ahead. Someone immediately found Gu Ning was coming. Qin Xiao opened her mouth at once. Gee. Isn't this Gu Ning? Who said she's scared? She's quite awesome. Qin Xiao did it on purpose to push Gu Ning into the center of trouble. The more she complimented Gu Ning, the unhappier Hao Ran would be. When Gu Ning showed up, Qin Xiao directly opened her phone, starting to shoot. She wanted to send the video to Gu Xiaoxiao after it was over. Hearing that, Gu Ning knew they weren't kind people. However, Gu Ning assumed Qin Xiao and her friends were those who came here to cause her trouble. You're Gu Ning, right? Hao Ran walked to Gu Ning and asked with certainty. Yes. What's up? Gu Ning answered calmly with confidence. She wasn't afraid at all. Hao Ran, what do you want to do? Seeing Hao Ran being here, Mu Ku, who followed Gu Ning, felt something must be wrong. He immediately stepped forward to protect Gu Ning. He had no idea why Hao Ran was here for Gu Ning, but he did know Hao Ran was here not because of Qin Xiao. Hao Ran was surprised that Mu Ku would protect Gu Ning, but he still continued. I saw the video about what had happened in the canteen on our school's forum. Everyone says Gu Ning is powerful. I disagree though. Thus, I'm here to challenge Gu Ning to have a fight with me. Does she dare to accept my challenge? What? Hearing that, Mu Ku and Yu Mixi was shocked. They all looked at Gu Ning with worry at once. Gu Ning, instead, remained calm. The boy was here to challenge her. Gu Ning even assumed he was here because of Qin Xiao. Mu Ku quietly swore at the person who had uploaded the video. The person apparently wanted to cause Gu Ning trouble. Gu Ning was displeased as well, but she was more interested than terrified in Hao Ran's challenge. Gu Ning was very familiar with Hao Ran's name because Hao Ran was as notorious as Chu Peihan in their school. He was often involved in fights and riots, and always absent in classes. Hao Ran had received as many punishments as Chu Peihan. But he couldn't have a high score like Chu Peihan. He was terrible at studying. Hao Ran was from a super rich family. His family was the third richest family with dozens of millions of assets in City F. Hao Ran, Qin Zixuan and Zhang Tianping, the three of them was a famous gang in their school. Gu Ning had also heard something about Qin Zixuan's and Zhang Tianping's background. Qin Zixuan was a son of the authorities, but Gu Ning didn't know his father's position. As for Zhang Tianping, it was said that he was an orphan. Those three boys had become good friends in a fight. Though they had very different background, they were truly intimate friends. Gu Ning had planned in her mind after she found out who those boys were. Hao Ran, how can you even beat a girl? Mu Ku was extremely annoyed. Though he believed Gu Ning's ability, these three boys weren't easy to handle. If she were an ordinary girl, it may look like I'm beating her, but since she does kung fu, we can learn from each other. Hao Ran didn't think there was anything wrong with that. Yes, if Gu Ning had been a common girl, he would never beat her, but the video had proved that she wasn't weak at all. Mu Ku was mad. Before he could continue, Gu Ning interrupted. What if I win, and what if I lose? Gu Ning asked. If you can win, I can do a thing for you, but if I win, you must do a thing for us. Relax, I won't let you do something immoral, Hao Ran replied. Hao Ran was a boy with principles. Sure, challenge accepted, but I want more than just a thing, Gu Ning said. The crowd was amazed by the result that Gu Ning accepted the challenge and even wanted to add chips. Although everyone believed Gu Ning was quite someone in the video, Hao Ran was well known for his outstanding ability in a fight. No one thought Gu Ning would win. Was Gu Ning being confident, or was she thinking too highly of herself? Boss, Muku called her with worry, but Gu Ning stopped him by a glance. Tell me, what do you want? Hao Ran was surprised Gu Ning would accept his challenge without hesitation. He now was more curious than surprised about Gu Ning's condition. He didn't know whether Gu Ning was being confident or arrogant, but he appreciated her attitude. 1 versus 3, if I lose, I'll do 3 things for you, but if I win, 3 of you must call me boss, and be loyal to me afterwards till the entrance exam is over, Gu Ning said airily while others were all in shock. What? 1 versus 3? The losers must call her boss? Gu Ning was so confident. After the shock, Hao Ran and his friends were irritated by Gu Ning's words. It was a humiliation to them. How could he call a girl boss? You want to be our boss? Interesting, Hao Ran sneered. Exactly, what the hell are you? Gu Ning, being confident is good, but don't be too over. Qin Zixuan and Zhang Tianping added in anger. I know who I am. Whether I'm being confident or arrogant, it's none of your business. At least, I'm not afraid. If you're cowards and don't dare to accept the challenge, then you lose. Gu Ning glanced through Hao Ran and his friends with obvious provocation. You. Hao Ran and his friends felt shamed after that. Their dignity didn't allow them to be hesitated. Cowards? We've never ever been cowards. Challenge accepted. Hao Ran answered with anger. Hao Ran was always the decision-maker among them. Since Hao Ran accepted, the other two all agreed. Besides, they didn't want to be cowards neither. Very well. Then I'll see you at 1 p.m. tomorrow in the small forest. Gu Ning said with satisfaction, which made Muku feel that she had everything in control. Well, he should believe in Gu Ning. Since Gu Ning was willing to accept the challenge, she must be confident to win. After what had happened during the past days, Yu Mixi knew Gu Ning would never change her mind once she had made her decision. Yu Mixi also remained quiet. She only needed to believe her friend. Then, Gu Ning directly turned around and went inside her classroom, leaving everyone behind. Hao Ran and his friends snorted, then were gone as well. The crowd dispersed afterwards since the major roles had all gone. There was a glance of viciousness in Chen Xiao's eyes when she watched Gu Ning walking away. She felt disappointed when Gu Ning stayed calm. Thus she hoped more that Gu Ning would lose tomorrow. The worse, the better. Zhang Yiming and Fu Mingliang had the same thought, while Qin Zhang's feelings were complicated. He wanted to see Gu Ning learn her lesson, but he also felt concerned for her. When Gu Ning entered the classroom, her classmates looked at her with worry, anticipation, but more with unkindness, especially Xiao Feifei and her friends. Xiao Feifei wanted to mock her, but the bell rang. Thus she had to close her mouth. Gu Ning, come out here for a moment. The head teacher asked Gu Ning to come out the minute she arrived. Gu Ning knew it must be because of what had happened tonight. The minute Gu Ning walked out of the classroom, the head teacher asked her in anger, "Why did you do that in the canteen? Why did you hit another schoolmate? And why did you accept the challenge of Hao Ran, Qin Zixuan and Zhang Tianping, who are from the 7th classroom? Do you know this is a big deal now, which has a bad impact on both you and our class?" Facing the head teacher's questions and anger, Gu Ning wasn't mad at all. She explained with patience instead, "Professor Zhang, it was because Gu Xiaoxiao has humiliated me and my mother first, then I hit her in the canteen. How can I be able to tolerate the humiliation like that? As for Hao Ran and his friends, they will never leave me alone if I didn't accept the challenge. I would rather face the trouble at the very beginning." Zhang Chihua actually knew Gu Ning's condition. She knew other students always bullied Gu Ning. However, since nothing severe had happened, she ignored all of them. It was understandable that Gu Ning would fight back. Though she believed it had been too over, Gu Ning had made the right choice for herself. Zhang Chihua didn't know what to say. But, she still couldn't accept the fact that Gu Ning had accepted the challenge of Hao Ran. "Gu Ning, can you, a girl, win over the 3 boys? Besides, the school won't allow students to fight. You'll be punished for that, and our class also will be criticized," Zhang Chihua said. Hearing that, Gu Ning was a little shocked. She totally forgot she would be punished for fighting, and her class would also be criticized for her behavior. "But I've promised them already. If I regret, Hao Ran will revenge on me." Gu Ning felt she had been cornered. My blood is boiling now." Gu Ning really pissed Zhang Chihua off. Although Gu Ning was the reason of all these troubles, Hao Ran was the major cause. Zhang Chihua couldn't blame Gu Ning for all. She also wasn't that cold-blooded to see Gu Ning revenged by Hao Ran only because Gu Ning regretted. If Hao Ran was going to take revenge on Gu Ning, even the school couldn't stop him. How about this? I can go have the fight with Hao Ran outside the school, then no one will be punished, Gu Ning said. Zhang Chihua was still displeased. Gu Ning, how could you be so dumb? How can you be so sure that you can win Hao Ran and his friends? What if you're hurt, and your mother will be worried? Can your family afford the medical treatment? Zhang Chihua had told the plain truth. She had no intention to insult Gu Ning, but it's for Gu Ning's good. Gu Ning understood her teacher cared about her, so she wasn't annoyed. Gu Ning replied with pure confidence, please don't worry about that. I am going to win them, really. It was hard for Zhang Chihua to believe, but she knew it was meaningless to continue this topic, so she said, good luck. After that, Zhang Chihua stopped talking to Gu Ning and left in anger. Gu Ning shrugged her shoulders resignedly and went back to her classroom. Although everyone in the classroom was all ears to listen to Zhang Chihua criticizing Gu Ning, Zhang Chihua kept her voice low and no one actually heard anything. They only saw Zhang Chihua leave in anger. Gu Ning, instead, was super calm from the very beginning to the end and wasn't sad or scared of being criticized at all. Everyone was puzzled. When Gu Ning walked inside, most of the students focused on her face wanting to figure out what had happened. Because the head teacher was gone, the classroom wasn't that quiet any longer. It wasn't one of the top classes, thus those students didn't enjoy studying very much. Read the latest stories and novilbin.com. Hey, Gu Ning, are you sure you're going to win them? A male student sat in front of Gu Ning, turning back to ask her in doubt. Exactly. 1 versus 3, that's really something. Another male student added with admiration. You have the great gesture. Do you have the same great ability? Someone poured cold water on Gu Ning. Exactly, I'm not positive about that, another one agreed. Most of the students didn't believe Gu Ning would succeed. Gu Ning ignored them, but Yumixi couldn't stay quiet anymore. She retorted for the first time, I believe in Gu Ning. I think she'll win. Gu Ning smiled a little. Yumixi made her progress. So what? You believe in her doesn't mean she'll win, a classmate argued. Exactly, I don't believe, someone said. We'll all find out tomorrow noon. It's too early to deny Gu Ning's ability now. Let's wait and see. Yumixi argued. Those who weren't positive turned quiet gradually. Some still wanted to pour cold water, but the head teacher returned. They had to close their mouth. In the house of the Gu family, a room was decorated in a dreamy way like it was a princess's room. Gu Xiaoxiao was in a pink nightgown, lying on a big pink bed with a phone in her hands. She was watching the video sent by Chen Ziyao, and felt it was a pity that she hadn't been there herself. Gu Xiaoxiao had the same reaction as Chen Ziyao. She felt extremely unhappy about Gu Ning's confidence, and didn't believe Gu Ning could win Hao Ran and his friends. She was gloating now. She couldn't wait to see Gu Ning beaten down on the ground tomorrow noon. Moreover, she was waiting for the apologies from Gu Ning. Gu Xiaoxiao decided to spare no effort to pick on Gu Ning. If Gu Ning wouldn't apologize, or she wasn't satisfied, she would persuade her grandma to kick Gu Ning and her mother out of the old house. The next morning, Gu Xiaoxiao waited at the stairs for Gu Ning. She wanted to seize the chance to make fun of Gu Ning. After a long time, Gu Ning was still absent. Gu Xiaoxiao was losing her patience. The morning class is about to begin. Is Gu Ning terrified to come to school today? Gu Xiaoxiao assumed. Who knows? Chen Ziyao was sure. It was 2 minutes away from the morning class. Gu Ning appeared with Mu Ke and Yumixi. Seeing Mu Ke, Gu Xiaoxiao and Chen Ziyao was more jealous of Gu Ning now. Mu Ke had been their friend before, but now he chose Gu Ning over them. Besides, Mu Ke was from a better family than them. They wanted to cooperate with Mu Ke. Unexpectedly, Mu Ke would stand up for Gu Ning against them. Mu Ke and Yumixi felt unpleasant when they noticed Gu Xiaoxiao and Chen Ziyao were here. Gu Ning stayed calm as usual. Gu Ning, I've heard that you're going to fight with those 3 boys this noon. 1 versus 3 even. You're bold and confident enough to do so, but are you really being confident, or you're simply arrogant? Gu Xiaoxiao said unkindly. I'm always confident. Gu Ning didn't want to hide her confidence. Gu Xiaoxiao hated Gu Ning most when she stayed so calm before the storm came. Gu Xiaoxiao wanted to tear Gu Ning apart. Gu Ning, keep pretending. I'll go and see how you become a loser right before my eyes. And if you don't apologize for what you've done yesterday, you'll pay for it. Gu Xiaoxiao clenched her teeth out of anger and hatred. I will never apologize. Do whatever you want to. I'm waiting, Gu Ning replied airily. Then she ignored Gu Xiaoxiao, throwing her a provocative look, and walked away. Gu Xiaoxiao was mad. She didn't expect Gu Ning would dare to do that. She shouted at Gu Ning back, Great, Gu Ning, you'll regret. Gu Ning, is it really going to be all right? Yu Mixi asked in worry. She was concerned Gu Ning and her mother would be homeless. Don't worry. It's fine, Gu Ning replied. Gradually, Yu Mixi had pure trust in Gu Ning. Since Gu Ning had said it would be fine, she would not doubt it. Mu Ke gave Gu Xiaoxiao and Chen Xiao a cold glance, then went back to his classroom. Some students still believed Gu Ning would not come to school today. When Gu Ning showed up, they were all surprised. Wasn't Gu Ning afraid at all? In the morning, Gu Ning had received many curious looks from others, their head teacher included. They all wanted to see fear from Gu Ning's face, but failed. Gu Ning was at ease, like nothing had happened. When the last class in the morning was about to over, the head teacher couldn't help asking Gu Ning, Are you really that confident? I never do anything without being fully prepared, Gu Ning answered with solemnity. The head teacher had nothing else to say. She left in quietness. The appointed time was 1 p.m. Gu Ning decided to eat first after the classes were over. When Gu Ning and her friends went upstairs, Hao Ran and his friends stopped them. They actually didn't mean to limit Gu Ning's freedom. They simply followed Gu Ning in case she would run away. Gu Ning felt resigned. Could anyone has any trust on her? Do you plan to buy me, your boss, a meal first? Gu Ning looked at them, joking. Gu Ning, don't be so confident. It's too early to say that, Hao Ran retorted. Qin Zixuan and Zhang Tianping glared at Gu Ning at the same time. Actually, those three boys weren't aggressive normally. However, whenever they encountered Gu Ning, they were easily irritated. Probably because Gu Ning was being too calm, which made them feel like they hadn't been taken seriously. Or probably because Gu Ning's calmness showed her confidence, which made them feel nervous unconsciously. Therefore, they would fight against her confidence by arguing. Aren't you confident? Gu Ning asked them. Hao Ran and his friends suddenly realized Gu Ning had outstanding ability to piss someone off. Everyone around them started to discuss. Gu Ning isn't scared at all. She's even in the mood of joking. Gu Xiaoxiao, Xiao Feifei and their friends all wanted Gu Ning to fail. Seeing Gu Ning being so confident, they were greatly displeased. I think she's pretending, Gu Xiaoxiao said. Exactly, she's merely pretended to be relaxed. Xiao Feifei wanted to mock at Gu Ning, but she restricted herself for Mu Ke was here. However, Mu Ke never glanced at her from the very beginning to the end. Xiao Feifei was disappointed. She wanted to talk to him, but Gu Ning and Yu Mixi were here as well. Since you're already here, why not? Gu Ning proposed. What? Hao Ran and his friends asked with one accord. I don't want to be punished for fighting inside the school, thus we'll fight outside. Since we all haven't had meal yet, why don't we have the fight first, and the loser will buy the meal. Plus the precious condition stays the same, Gu Ning said in a provocative way. Very well, Hao Ran and his friends agreed. Up.dfrm no/v/e/lb I n.co/m. There's a newly demolished ruin at the opposite side of the back door of our school. There are few people around. Let's go there. Then, Gu Ning moved first, followed by Mu Ke and Yu Mixi. Hao Ran and his friends were behind. The onlookers wouldn't miss that. All of the 40 students in the 4th classroom were here, along with Gu Xiaoxiao and her friends and dozens of students from other classrooms. A group of people moved outside attracted much attention. It wasn't usual to see such a large gathering of students in the school. Many people immediately knew there was going to be a fight. Those cowards all stayed away, while those who wanted to see a drama followed up. Accordingly, a group of dozens of students became a group of hundreds. The security guards of the school also noticed that. But unless someone got hurt, they wouldn't do anything about it. Gu Ning and others went straight to the ruin. Everyone was excited when they arrived at the ruin, pulling out a phone, preparing to shoot. Although Mu Ke and Yu Mixi chose to believe in Gu Ning, they felt anxious. They didn't want her to be injured. Boss, fighting! Gu Ning, fighting! When Mu Ke and Yu Mixi tried to encourage Gu Ning, their voices were trembling a little. Just trust me, Gu Ning comforted them. Her determined voice calmed Mu Ke and Yu Mixi down a lot. Shall we stop when it's necessary, or shall we fight to the end? Before they started, Gu Ning asked. As long as someone fall on the ground, he or she loses. Hao Ran didn't want to go too far, given that Gu Ning was a girl. Gu Ning had a great impression of Hao Ran's behavior, but she also knew they still didn't take her seriously enough. If one didn't take his opponent seriously, he would lose in any kind of fight. Great, then, let's begin. Gu Ning announced the beginning, and both sides moved. Gu Ning moved extremely fast. Before everyone could see it clearly, Gu Ning came straight to Zhang Tianping's face. She threw Zhang Tianping over her shoulder without hesitation. Zhang Tianping, who was a tall strong boy, was easily thrown over by Gu Ning's shoulder to the ground. Everyone was in a shock. Zhang Tianping himself was struck dumb too. He still had no idea what had happened when he was thrown to the floor. Obviously, Gu Ning had seized her chance when Zhang Tianping didn't take her seriously. Those boys were real fighter actually. If they were fully prepared, it would cost Gu Ning more time to deal with them. Hao Ran and Qin Zixuan was totally amazed, but they got their mind back soon. They were astonished in their heart, but never hesitated to move. If they hadn't taken Gu Ning seriously before, now they wouldn't do the same thing. Facing Qin Zixuan's fist, Gu Ning raised hers to his, but when their fists were about to meet each other, Gu Ning suddenly kicked on Qin Zixuan's stomach. Qin Zixuan stepped backwards at short notice, like he had been hit by a heavy object. Luckily, he was strong enough and didn't fall. The crowd was shocked again. Some instantly raised their anticipation of Gu Ning. Those who wanted to see Gu Ning lose were all disappointed now. Hao Ran tried to get Gu Ning down on the ground by attaching her legs with his. Since now Gu Ning stood on the floor with one leg, everyone thought she was going to lose this time. Even Mu Ke and Yu Mixi took a long breath in. Unexpectedly, Gu Ning brought her another leg back at once, then kicked out at Hao Ran's leg. Hao Ran was unable to stand steadily afterwards. Of course, Gu Ning stepped backwards for a short distance as well. Right at that moment, Qin Zixuan attacked Gu Ning with his fist. Gu Ning didn't escape at all though. She reached out her hand, directly holding Qin Zixuan's fist in her palm. Gu Ning was still a teenage girl. Her hand didn't fully cover Qin Zixuan's fist, but she was powerful enough to stop Qin Zixuan from moving at all. Qin Zixuan didn't panic. He immediately used another hand to hit Gu Ning, but his fist was held by her palm once more. Then, before Qin Zixuan would able to attack her again, Gu Ning raised her foot and aimed at his shin. Qin Zixuan lost his balance, falling heavily on the ground. The crowd rounded their eyes in shock again. Within only three moves, Qin Zixuan was down on the ground. Qin Zixuan, the boy who normally could fight again around 7 people, now was defeated by Gu Ning within 3 moves. It was hard for anyone of the crowd to accept the fact. At last, only Hao Ran was standing straight. Actually, Hao Ran knew he was going to lose at that moment, but he wouldn't give up without fighting. Thus, he must be more violent than usual. After several rounds, when Hao Ran wasn't able to stand steadily, Gu Ning kicked him right away. But she was caught by him at an important point. The crowd thought Hao Ran was going to win this time. However, Gu Ning used her another foot to grab the ground tightly, turning her body afterwards. Her foot got rid of Hao Ran's hand at once. Then, Gu Ning continued to kick. Now, it was too late for Hao Ran to defend himself. He was kicked accurately and fell down. He lost. The best fighter Hao Ran lost the fight within 10 moves. Everyone was more than shocked. They lost, really. Hao Ran and his another 2 brothers versus Gu Ning, and the boys lost. Gu Ning had won the game easily too. Nobody would believe what they had just witnessed. Even Mu Ke and Yu Mixi, who believed in Gu Ning, was completely amazed. Jesus! Did I see it wrong? Gu Ning, she won. I think we must be in a dream. Gu Ning won the game? Exactly. I can't believe my eyes. It's so unreal. But the truth is not only has Gu Ning won, she also won it so easily. She looked so cool when she was attacking them. Yes. Especially the flip, it was so cool. I truly believe Gu Ning is a real master now. For now, no one would question whether Gu Ning was a master of Kung Fu anymore. In ordinary people's eyes, she was. Hao Ran and his friends were still in shock, but they were more qualified than anyone else to admit the truth, because they had been through the whole progress. While Xiao Feifei, Gu Xiaoxiao and their friends were totally unwilling to accept the fact. Xiao Feifei even blurted out, "No, no, no. It's impossible. Hao Ran and his friends must haven't done it with full strength." Even though there were some students who had the same thought, no one dared to say it out. It was a humiliation to Hao Ran and his friends. No one wanted to have bad blood with them. Hao Ran and his friends had lost the fight, which was humiliating enough. Xiao Feifei's words had added fuel on the flames. They were in a rage at once. "Shut your bloody mouth up. Don't think that I'm not one to punch women." Hao Ran shouted at Xiao Feifei in great anger like he was about to beat her. Xiao Feifei immediately shut her mouth, holding her breath in horror. She looked to Mu Ku, searching for sympathy and comfort. Unfortunately, Mu Ku glared at her, apparently because she had questioned Gu Ning. Right now, Xiao Feifei felt deeply hurt and aggrieved. She started to cry. Xiao Feifei wasn't smart actually. Since she liked Mu Ku, she should never pick on someone he cherished, but she did otherwise. It would only make Mu Ku hate her if she picked on Gu Ning. Hao Ran's shout shut Xiao Feifei and many others' mouth, Gu Xiaoxiao and her friends were included. "Well, I didn't expect it would end so soon. We even came outside the school for it. If it had been for fear of punishment, I don't think we need to waste the time," Gu Ning said, like they had made a mountain out of a molehill. Hearing this, everyone was speechless. Who could know this would end so easily? Your F4 stories on /o/v/lbn.cm. At the same time, Hao Ran and his friends felt so embarrassed that they even wanted to hide into a crack on the ground. Gu Ning was really powerful. Hao Ran took a deep breath, looking at Gu Ning. Although he felt ashamed after he had lost the fight, he admired Gu Ning after all. Thus, he admitted without further ado. "We lost the game, and you're our boss from now on," Hao Ran said with sincerity. "Yes, you're our boss from now on," Qin Zixuan and Zhang Tianping followed. "Very well," Gu Ning answered. She suddenly said then, "I'm hungry, let's go eat first. Since I'm the winner, I'll make the decision of the food." Gu Ning gave Mu Ku and Yumixi a hint to follow her up, then she left in a hurry. Gu Ning wasn't hungry actually. She just didn't want to be stared at by a group of people any longer. Since Hao Ran and his friends had already accepted Gu Ning as their boss, they would follow her order, and they never lacked of money. Seeing Gu Ning walking away, Xiao Feifei, Gu Xiaoxiao and their friends' eyes were all full of disappointment and deep hatred. Why? Why did Gu Ning suddenly become so powerful? Chen Xiao, Zhang Yiming and Fu Mingliang felt disappointed too. At the same time, they were also terrified. Gu Ning wasn't only powerful now. She also had the support of Hao Ran and his friends. What if she revenged on them for what they had done to her? Thinking of this, they all felt concerned. Qin Zhang's feelings, meanwhile, ran the gamut of emotions. He slightly regretted breaking up with Gu Ning because the girl was so impressive now. But thinking further, he calmed down. No matter how impressive Gu Ning was, she was still a poor girl who would not help him for anything and probably would embarrass him. On the way while leaving, Gu Xiaoxiao pulled out her phone and sent Gu Man a message. It was a message with photos of Gu Ning in a fight with others. Visually, Gu Ning seemed to be hit by the boys. Gu Man was walking downstairs after she had finished her meal in the canteen. She heard the ringtone, then took out the phone to check. Though she used a cheap old phone, it still could receive photos. When Gu Man saw the photos on her phone, she was scared and fell down from the stairs by accident. Her head hit the ground even. On the other side, Hao Ran and his friends called Gu Ning their boss all the time after they left the crowd. They complimented Gu Ning the same way Mu Ke had done before. "Boss, since we all listen to you now, can you teach us Kung Fu? We want to be helpful in the future." Exactly, boss, you're so awesome. Normally, each of us can fight against 7 or 8 men, but all of us together can't win you. You won the fight so easily. Boss. Hao Ran and his friends wouldn't stop talking. Gu Ning felt noisy, but not displeased. Seeing how Ran and his friends now were like obedient dogs, Mu Ku and Yu Mixi felt so proud. However, Mu Ku was still annoyed that they had disrespected Gu Ning before. Well, how come someone who was so arrogant now is like an obedient dog? Mu Ku said deliberately. Find the new ST-ovals on n/velben.com. Hearing that, Hao Ran and his friends were embarrassed. They knew Mu Ku was unhappy about their previous attitude towards Gu Ning, thus they didn't blame Mu Ku for his words. Hao Ran walked to Mu Ku, placing his hand on Mu Ku's shoulder. If we didn't fight, we won't get to know each other. Let the bygones be the bygones. We're brothers from now on. If you have any need and want my help in the future, just tell me. Yeah. Yeah. Qin Zixuan and Zhang Tianping agreed. Mu Ku wasn't really mad at them actually. He also understood they were friends now, since they had taken Gu Ning as their boss. They even had changed their attitude. Mu Ku thought there was no need to hate them any longer. Mixi is a child without much strength. We need to take care of her, Gu Ning said. Sure, no problem, everyone immediately agreed. Yu Mixi was a little shy, but she accepted. Gu Ning didn't plan to eat an expensive meal. She simply wanted to have hot pot. But when they just walked to the restaurant, Gu Ning's phone rang. Both Yu Mixi and Mu Ku were slightly surprised when Gu Ning took out her phone. They knew Gu Ning's family was poor. She had used a cheap old phone before, but now she used a brand new one, which seemed expensive. Hao Ran and his friends didn't know Gu Ning was from a poor family. They didn't find anything wrong. The caller was Gu Man. Gu Ning answered it at once. Her face changed suddenly when she heard the voice from the other side. Gu Ning said she would come soon, then hung up. Boss, what's up? Everyone noticed Gu Ning's change and knew something bad must have happened. They all asked in worry. My mother fell from the stairs and now is in unconsciousness. She was sent to the hospital. I need to visit her right now. You can have the meal without me. Gu Ning didn't hide the fact. She ran to take a taxi to the hospital afterwards. Boss, before the rest could realize, Gu Ning was already gone. Let's go and visit as well, Mu Ku said. He ran ahead immediately. Hao Ran and the others all followed up without hesitation. Their boss's mother was in danger. They couldn't step aside. At that moment, a black Maserati moved over at a very high speed. There were 2 men sitting inside. Ling Xiaoting sat on the passenger seat. He frowned a little. He was losing his patience, because the one who was sitting on the driver's seat wouldn't stop talking, but he didn't interrupt. Xiaoting, leave it to our 4th bro. You're not fully recovered yet. What if you get injured again? Do take care of yourself. The man on the driver's seat complained for Ling Xiaoting's good. The man on the driver's seat was the one who had helped Ling Xiaoting destroy the tapes the other day. He was in a white casual suit as usual, looking handsome, decent and charming. He didn't care. Ling Xiaoting ignored him, continuing to talk. Why do you have to get yourself involved in so much business? You even don't want to have a vacation. I don't think any girl will like you if you continue to do that. From afar, Ling Xiaoting's sight fell on a girl in a school uniform on the sidewalk. The girl seemed worried and was in a hurry to take a taxi. At the first glance, Ling Xiaoting felt familiar with the girl's figure. After they approached near, Ling Xiaoting recognized her. He immediately said, "Stop." The man who was still talking stopped the car unconsciously when he was interrupted. The car ceased right before Gu Ning. What's wrong? The man asked, but Ling Xiaoting didn't answer his question. He rolled the car window down. Get in the car, he said to the outside. Gu Ning saw the car stop in front of her. She was about to move away when she heard a familiar voice. It was the man who had been injured the other night. Gu Ning was a little amazed. But she heard him clearly. The man obviously wanted to give her a lift. Gu Ning was in a hurry now. She didn't reject, but opened the car door and got inside. Meanwhile, the man on the driver's seat was shocked. He didn't expect Ling Xiaoting asked him to stop the car to let the female student get inside. But, who the hell was she? How could he had no idea that Leng Xiaoting knew such a young female student? Leng Xiaoting normally never got in touch with any woman. The hospital, thanks, Gu Ning said without further delay. The hospital? Leng Xiaoting frowned a little. He was puzzled why she was going to the hospital, but he didn't ask at all. He said to the man on the drivers directly, "Drive the car." What? Oh, right. The man was apparently absent-minded. He got his mind back immediately when he heard Leng Xiaoting's voice. He drove the car ahead quickly. There were many questions in the man's mind. He kept peeking at Leng Xiaoting, who was sitting beside, then peeked at Gu Ning from the rearview mirror. This female student was good-looking though, but she was too young. She couldn't be Leng Xiaoting's type. "Focus on driving," Leng Xiaoting said coldly. The man was frightened, then paid his attention on the road. He was still confused about the relationship between the female student and Leng Xiaoting. However, he didn't have the nerve to ask. Right at that moment, Gu Ning's phone rang. She picked it up. Before she could say anything, she heard Muku's worried voice, "Boss, whose car did you get in? Are you safe?" When Muku and others followed up, they saw Gu Ning get in a black Maserati. They were all shocked because they knew the car was so expensive. The owner must be the rich or the authorities. Although Gu Ning got in the car must be because she knew the driver, Muku decided to call her to make sure she was safe. "I'm fine. You all can go back to the school now," Gu Ning replied. "No, we want to visit your mother as well. We'll see you in the hospital." Muku hung up directly before Gu Ning could respond, in case Gu Ning wouldn't allow them to come. Gu Ning knew they were being kind, thus she agreed. Both Leng Xiaoting and the man had good hearing. Although they had no intention to eavesdrop, they were able to hear the talk clearly. Both now understood the reason why Gu Ning was in a hurry. "May I help?" Leng Xiaoting suddenly opened his mouth. The man on the driver's seat turned the steering wheel in horror. He almost hit the car before them. Luckily, he was a skillful driver and didn't cause an accident. But it wasn't his fault though. Leng Xiaoting, who was always cold, opened his mouth to offer a help out of the blue, which was totally frightening to him. Leng Xiaoting glared at the man. The man immediately paid his attention back to the road. He was also hoping Leng Xiaoting wouldn't say more to frighten him. Gu Ning didn't care though. Facing Leng Xiaoting's kindness, she rejected with politeness, "Thank you so much. I can handle it myself." Since Gu Ning wanted to deal with it on her own, Leng Xiaoting stopped asking. He wasn't a warm-hearted person. He helped her only because she had helped him. But Leng Xiaoting wasn't aware Gu Ning simply had made a deal with him. He didn't owe her anything. At the same time, the video of Gu Ning versus Hao Ran and his friends went viral on their school's forum. Ever since Hao Ran had challenged Gu Ning, there were many students paid close attention to it. The news that Gu Ning had accepted Hao Ran's challenge and the appointed time along with place were all revealed on the forum last night. Many said they would go to watch the fight at 1 p.m. All west ch.rs on n.o/vli/n/.cm. But unexpectedly, the fight had ended before 1 p.m. Everyone was shocked by the result too. 80% of the students didn't believe Gu Ning could win, while 10% abstained, and the rest 10% believed in Gu Ning. They thought Gu Ning was really powerful on the video in the canteen, and she was very confident. Not everyone would take confidence as arrogance. The result was Gu Ning had won. Gu Ning really had won the fight within several minutes, which was a shocking news. What the F***ck, who said it was 1 p.m. at the football field. How come it ended so soon? Exactly, I lost the chance to watch it in person. Who leaked the appointed time and place? Come out, we promise we won't beat you to death. Yes. Come out and explain to us. Come out. Meanwhile, the guy who had leaked the appointed time and place last night was now in sadness as well, because he hadn't watched the fight in person neither. He was also mad. This is so unbelievable. Gu Ning alone won Hao Ran and his another two brothers? Who can tell me whether it's true? It must be something wrong with my computer. I need to restart it. I'm now an admirer of Gu Ning. She's so cool, isn't she? She is. She beat Zhang Tianping down to the ground by one move. It's so amazing. And her flip is so cool too. Some admired Gu Ning while some doubted. Did Hao Ran and his friends use their full strength? I still can't believe Gu Ning a girl alone and win them. Exactly. I doubt it too. The minute doubts appeared, those admirers of Gu Ning started to retort. Are you all blind? I was there in person. I saw it with my eyes. They did fight with full strength. If you don't believe you can have a fight with Gu Ning herself, then you'll know. Exactly, not everyone is able to do flip in the air. Gu Ning now is the boss of Hao Ran and his friends. If you dare to question Gu Ning, you are questioning Hao Ran and his friends. Be careful about that. Xiao Feifei was almost hit by Hao Ran when she questioned the result on site. Knowing that, those who had doubts were all quiet now. They were scared of Hao Ran and his friends. I think I'm going to tell my goddess that I like her. Wish me good luck. Wish you good luck. Hope you can survive. Wish you good luck. Actually, I want to see a drama. Wish you good luck. Waiting for the result. Wish you good luck. Although they were wishing the student good luck, they all actually wanted to see a drama. As for Gu Ning, she couldn't care less about those discussions. It took half an hour to get to the hospital normally, but the man drove there steadily within 20 minutes. Gu Ning thanked Lin Xiaoting, then left the car. She immediately ran to the outpatient department. The Maserati stayed at the same place instead. Ling Xiaoting and the man watched Gu Ning leaving. Xiaoting, who is this female student? I never saw you help anyone on your own initiative, the man couldn't help but ask at the end. He felt extremely uncomfortable to keep it to himself. Let's go, Ling Xiaoting ignored the man's question. Fine, the man answered. However, he was now more curious than ever. Since Ling Xiaoting wasn't willing to tell him, there was no need to keep asking. The man decided to do the research on his own. The man, who was Su Jinchen, believed it was easy for him to find out the truth. While Gu Ning was running, she pulled out her phone and called Gu Man. The one who had called Gu Ning was Gu Man's female colleague, Wang Sufan. Wang Sufan got along well with Gu Man. Gu Ning knew her too. After Gu Man had fallen down from the stairs, Wang Sufan and the driver from their factory had driven her to the hospital. Wang Sufan let Gu Ning call Gu Man when she arrived at the hospital, then Wang Sufan would tell her where they were. Because they were already on the road. The phone was answered. Before Gu Ning could say a word, the other side said first, Gu Ning, have you arrived? Your mother is in the hospital now, but we don't have enough money, so your mother hasn't been admitted yet. She's on a patient bed in the hallway of the first floor of the inpatient department now. Hearing that, Gu Ning was slightly annoyed. She was mad not because the hospital wouldn't admit a patient without money. She understood the hospital wasn't a charity. However, she felt guilty that Gu Man hadn't received the treatment on time. Gu Ning rushed to her mother without delay. At the same time, Gu Ning called in Qian to make sure her mother would be administered well and soon. Hi, who's this? And Qian didn't have Gu Ning's phone number. She was regretting not asking for it those days. Gu Ning said straightforwardly, Missin, this is Gu Ning. I need your help now. My mother just fell down the stairs. I haven't met her yet, and I don't know how she is right now, but she needs to be admitted. Could you please arrange a VIP patient room and the exam for my mother? I'll pay the bill later. Gu Ning actually had no idea about Qian's position in the hospital, but since she worked here, it would be quicker if she helped. It was about Gu Man's health. Gu Ning couldn't waste the time. After Qian found out the caller was Gu Ning, she felt happy in her heart. She even wanted to complain that Gu Ning hadn't contacted her recently. However, when Qian knew Gu Ning's mother had fallen down from the stairs, she immediately agreed to help. No problem. Where are you now? Qian asked with anxiety. I'm about to be at the first floor of the inpatient department. My mother is in the hallway, Gu Ning replied. Great. I'll make the arrangement right away. Please wait a moment. Qian hung up before Gu Ning answered. She arranged it at once. Before long, Gu Ning arrived at the hallway of the first floor in the inpatient department. She found Gu Man there. There was a woman of the same age stood beside Gu Man. She was Wang Sufan. A man, who was about 20 years old, was with Wang Sufan. He was the driver who had sent Gu Man to the hospital. Nice to meet you, Gu Ning greeted Wang Sufan. Then she immediately checked Gu Man. Gu Man was still unconscious now. Gu Ning didn't hesitate to use her jade eyes to see through Gu Man's head. There was only a red swollen injure on the back of her head. Gu Ning was slightly relieved. But now the power of her jade eyes was limited. It cost her much power to see through Gu Man's head. Her face also turned pale afterwards. Thus Gu Ning didn't have enough power to help Gu Man recover. From having been reborn till now, Gu Ning had never been so eager to have adequate power in her jade eyes. In that case, she would be able to help Gu Man. But now she couldn't do anything. After a few minutes, Qian came to Gu Ning with several other male doctors. Gu Ning, I've already arranged a VIP patient room with exam equipment. Let's go there now, Qian said. Those male doctors pushed the patient bed on which Gu Man was lying ahead. Wang Sufin rounded her eyes in shock. She knew Gu Man's financial condition well. Gu Man barely could afford the hospitalization cost, but now she was going to stay in a VIP patient room? Although Wang Sufin was curious, it wasn't appropriate to ask. The/W novel chapter S are published on no/vel/bin.co/m. Thank you so much for driving my mother to the hospital. I understand that you still need to work. We'll thank you again when my mother wakes up, Gu Ning said to Wang Sufin and the driver. Gu Ning and her mother basically would buy them a meal or some gifts to thank them. Don't worry about it. Your mother's health is the most important thing for you now. Take good care of her, and we're going back, Wang Sufin replied, then left with the driver. When Gu Ning and the others walked in the patient room, Mu Ke called her. Mu Ke and his friends had taken the taxi and was 10 minutes late. Boss, where are you? We're in the hospital now, Mu Ke asked in worry. Room V08, 7th floor of the inpatient department, Gu Ning answered. She hung up directly because she was in a hurry to visit Gu Man. Mu Ke was slightly surprised when he heard room V08. How come it was a VIP patient room? Though Mu Ke was puzzled, he was sure that he had heard it clearly. It wasn't the time to doubt. Mu Ke immediately ran ahead when he knew the number of the patient room. Qian checked Gu Man's body in person. Gu Ning stood aside. Although she was worried, she stayed quiet. She didn't want to bother Qian. Mu Ke and the rest arrived soon. They saw Gu Man was under exam, thus they didn't walk in right away. They didn't want to bother them neither. Mu Ke, what's going on here? How come Gu Ning's mother is in a VIP patient room? Mixi didn't found out Gu Ning's mother stayed in a VIP patient room till she arrived. She was very surprised since she knew well about the financial condition of Gu Ning's family. I have no idea either. Mu Ke was confused too. Why can't boss mother stays in a VIP patient room? Hao Ran and his brothers didn't know Gu Ning's background. They all felt puzzled about the talk between Mu Ke and Mixi. Mu Ke then told Hao Ran and his brothers about the financial condition of Gu Ning's family. Hao Ran and his brothers had a lot of sympathy for Gu Ning. They believed Gu Ning's mother stayed in a VIP patient room in order to get a better treatment. Meanwhile, the cost was also high. We can't let boss pay all the bills alone. I'll pay the medical treatment for her mother, Hao Ran said. He did that to support his boss. Me too. Mu Ke, Qin Zixuan and Zhang Tianping all agreed. Although Zhang Tianping was an orphan, he had opened a bar along with Hao Ran and Qin Zixuan. The bar was very profitable, thus he was kind of a rich boy now. Only Mixi, who was from the same poor family as Gu Ning, felt guilty. She wasn't able to help Gu Ning at all, since her mother was in need of a large amount of money to pay the medicine now. Mu Ke understood Mixi was sad. He comforted her, Mixi, I know your background. You don't need to feel guilty at all, because you also need help. If you need us, just let us know. Hearing that, Hao Ran and his brothers then found out Mixi's family was also poor. Exactly. We're friends now. If you need us, be free to tell us, Hao Ran and his brothers agreed. They didn't care about money actually. They cherished friendship more. Mixi was so moved, and was about to cry. Although she needed help, she wasn't willing to owe them a favor. Around half an hour later, the result was out. Gu Ning, you don't need to worry. Your mother is fine. She just hit the back of her head. There's only a swollen injury. Besides, your mother fell down from the stairs only because she lacks of nutrition. She's weak and needs a good rest. And Qian was relieved that Gu Man was fine. Glad to hear that. When my mother can wake up then? Gu Ning was also relieved, but she felt hurt that her mother lacks of nutrition. She didn't want to wait any longer. Once Gu Man woke up, she would tell Gu Man something about her. From now on, she wanted Gu Man to live a good life. She needs infusion of nutrition solution now, and probably will be awake within 1 or 2 hours, and Qian said. She then asked a nurse to take some nutrition solution from the pharmacy. Gu Ning saw Mu Ke and the rest earlier on, but she was too worried about Gu Man, so she didn't walk out to meet them. Now Gu Man was fine, Gu Ning was relieved and went out to meet them. Boss, how's your mother? Mu Ke and others asked when Gu Ning came out. Nothing serious. She just hit her head, and lacks of nutrition. Gu Ning said airily, but she felt sad in heart. Everyone was greatly relieved, but also had sympathy for Gu Man being in malnutrition. It's late now. You all need to go back to the school. We have classes in the afternoon, Gu Ning said. No big deal. We don't care about the classes. We'll stay here with you, Hao Ran said. They couldn't leave Gu Ning alone right now. Exactly, we don't mind the classes, Qin Zixuan and Zhang Tianping agreed. They were used to skipping classes. Boss, I can ask for a leave this afternoon. Mu Ke also wanted to stay. Although he seldom asked for a leave normally as a good student, since today was different, he couldn't abandon Gu Ning. Gu Ning, I can ask for a leave too. No one was leaving. Yu Mixi of course wasn't willing to. Moreover, she was still concerned about Gu Ning now. Boss, please don't push us away. We must stay with you this afternoon. Hao Ran said with determination in case Gu Ning would reject. Gu Ning felt touched. Except Yu Mixi, she had just met the rest for a short time, but they all cared about her. Great! Gu Ning knew they wouldn't leave, so she agreed at the end. Boss, we're going to buy some food first. You can stay with your mother, Hao Ran said. He then pulled Qin Zixuan and Zhang Tianping to leave. They had come to an agreement already. Mu Ke and Yu Mixi knew clearly Hao Ran and his brothers were also going to deal with something else except food. They were going to pay the bill for Gu Man. However, they were told the bill had been paid already. What had happened? Who paid the bill? Hao Ran inquired. Dr. N paid all the costs, the worker said. Dr. N? A male or female doctor? Hao Ran asked. He started to gossip. A female doctor, the worker replied. Is she boss friend or relative? Hao Ran guessed, but since the bill had already been paid, they could only go to buy food. Get your Avrite Ovals at no/v/e/lbn.com. Before Qian left, she had arranged everything well and told Gu Ning to call her if any need arose. When Qian was gone, Mu Ke and Gu Ning called the head teacher to ask for a leave one by one. Zhang Qiuhua didn't know Gu Ning had won Hao Ran and his friends till now. She was shocked, but also relieved. Sorry, Professor Zhang, my mother is in hospital now. I need to ask for a leave to take care of my mother. And Yu Mixi is with me too. Please allow us to stay, Gu Ning said. Okay. The head teacher couldn't refuse since her student's mother had an accident. Half an hour later, before Hao Ran and his brothers came back, Gu Man woke up calling Gu Ning's name. Her voice was full of concern and anxiety. Mom, I'm here. Gu Ning immediately ran over, catching Gu Man's hand. Ning Ning, is it really you? Seeing Gu Ning, Gu Man was a little surprised. She asked with worries, how are you? Did you get hurt? Gu Man said, and wanted to check Gu Ning's injuries. Gu Ning pressed Gu Man's hand to stop her. If Gu Man moved, she would pull the needle. Mom, I'm totally fine. Gu Ning didn't know why Gu Man would ask her that, but she comforted her mother at once. Really? I've received photos from Xiao Xiao. I saw you hit by someone. I was terrified. Gu Man was still in horror. Her body trembled lightly. Knowing that, Gu Ning's face changed. What? Gu Xiaoxiao had sent photos of her fighting with Hao Ran to Gu Man. Gu Man had fallen down from stairs because of that. Very well. Gu Xiaoxiao irritated her once more. Mu Ke and Yu Mixi were also displeased. Gu Xiaoxiao actually intended to let Gu Man know Gu Ning was in fight with other schoolmates, thus Gu Man would criticize Gu Ning. She had no idea Gu Man would fall. But the accident had already happened, and Gu Ning would never let Gu Xiaoxiao get away with it. Although Gu Ning was in a rage, she still explained to Gu Man with patience, "Mom, no one has beaten me. I was simply having fun with my friends. You know Gu Xiaoxiao never likes me. She always picks on me. I refused to apologize, thus she deliberately took those photos. She simply wants you to blame me, but I'm fine as usual." Gu Ning said, then rolled up her sleeves to let Gu Man check. Although it was winter, the temperature wasn't low. Gu Ning didn't wear much. She easily rolled her sleeves up, and her beautiful arms without any wounds were out in the air. Get the latest chapters on n/velbin.com. Yes, we were just having some fun. We didn't fight. Yeah. Mu Ke and Yu Mixi immediately stepped ahead, helping Gu Ning explain to her mother. Gu Man then found out there were other people in the room. They both were in the same school uniform. Gu Man knew they must be Gu Ning's schoolmates. Gu Man chose to believe Gu Ning. Afterwards, she was completely convinced by Gu Ning and her schoolmates that they hadn't fight. That's great. That's great, Gu Man said. Then, Gu Man looked around the room, and she was surprised. She instantly realized this wasn't an ordinary patient room. It must be a luxury one. But, she couldn't afford such a room. Ning, I'm fine now. Let's leave the hospital as soon as the infusion ends, Gu Man said. Gu Ning knew Gu Man well. She comforted her mother, "Mom, your head is injured, and you greatly lack of nutrition. You need to have a good rest. Don't worry about money. I'll explain to you later." Since Mu Ke and Yu Mixi were both here, Gu Ning couldn't tell her mother now. But, Gu Man wouldn't listen to Gu Ning. How could she not worry about money? She knew better than anyone else about their financial condition. You have to listen to me, and you can't leave the hospital without the doctor's permission. You have no idea how worried I was when you were in unconsciousness. If anything terrible had happened to you, what should I do? Gu Ning used her ace in the hole, even Mu Ke and Yu Mixi were touched. Gu Man didn't know what to say all of a sudden. She compromised, "Fine, I'll listen to you." However, Gu Man was still uneasy about the money. Gu Ning knew clearly what her mother was worried about, but she had to wait till her friends were gone. After a while, Hao Ran and his brothers were back with many packages of expensive healthcare products. Those healthcare products were worth thousands at least. Gu Man and Gu Ning were shocked. "Why did you buy so many of these?" "Boss, nothing is more important than your mother's health. Please accept all of them," Hao Ran said. Gu Ning felt moved. She understood their kindness. They were rich kids who never lacked of money. Thus Gu Ning accepted at the end. "Great, let's eat first." Ning, it was unacceptable to Gu Man though, because those products were too expensive. Gu Ning comforted, "Mom, it's fine. They're my good friends. They do this out of kindness. We can't reject that." "Exactly, please accept our gifts." "We all hope you can recover soon," Hao Ran and his brothers immediately added. They were afraid Gu Man would say no. Now, even Gu Man didn't want to hurt them. Although Hao Ran and the others didn't know when Gu Man would wake up, they still had prepared nutritious meal for her. After the meal, An Qian came with another bunch of healthcare products. "Dr. An, nice to meet you." Seeing An Qian came with a lot of healthcare products, Gu Man felt very grateful. "Gu Ning's mother, please have a good rest. If you have any need, just tell me. Gu Ning and I are friends. Your health is the most important," An Qian said kindly. "Dr. An, I even don't know how to thank you." Gu Man felt more grateful now. "It's nothing," An Qian said. An Qian was still on duty, so she left after a short while. In the afternoon, everyone stayed in the room to keep Gu Man's company. They told jokes once in a while. Gu Man beamed often. Gu Ning didn't tell anyone else that Gu Man was in hospital, Gu Qing included. She didn't want to worry them. Gu Ning didn't attend classes this afternoon, which became an excuse for Xiao Feifei to make fun of Gu Ning. I think Gu Ning probably is playing around with Hao Ran and his brothers. She even didn't come to school this afternoon. I agree. Hao Ran and his brothers aren't good boys after all, Yang Yulu added. Wu Qingya immediately followed up, that will explain what has happened this afternoon. Although Gu Ning isn't weak, I still believe Hao Ran lost the game on purpose because he likes Gu Ning. Try saying these to Gu Ning, Hao Ran and his bros' faces. Don't ever badmouth behind their backs, losers, an admirer of Gu Ning retorted. Exactly, she didn't come must be because she was in the middle of something. The head teacher said nothing about it. Why do you have to criticize her? Don't think too highly of yourself. You're not a princess only because you're from a rich family. Exactly. Someone must forget that Hao Ran won't tolerate her. Xiao Feifei was announced, but she had to admit that she didn't want to irritate Hao Ran. Or, why she could only badmouth them behind their backs. She didn't forget what Hao Ran had said to her this noon. Actually, most of the classmates hated Xiao Feifei and her friends. They knew these girls enjoyed gossiping and behaved badly, but they didn't dare to say anything because those girls had great background. However, since they admired Gu Ning now, they couldn't stand it when Xiao Feifei and her friends badmouthed Gu Ning in public. They had to do something. When En Qian was off duty, she came to visit Gu Man again. Dr. In, when can I leave the hospital? Gu Man asked. En Qian told Gu Man in the way Gu Ning had asked her to do. You've hit your head. It takes 1 or 2 days to make sure that you're all good. Recurrence of the injury can be terrible. Hearing that, Gu Man was a little scared. If it got worse, it could cost more money. Thus, Gu Man closed her mouth. But in her heart, she was still worried about money. Gu Ning's mother, please don't worry and relax. It'll help you recover and won't cost much. If you can't have a good rest, your health will be affected. En Qian knew Gu Man's feelings and used them to comfort as well as threaten her. Gu Man literally had been scared. She tried to relax in order to recover soon and cost less money. After the dinner, Mu Ku and others were gone. Before they left, they asked Gu Ning whether they should teach Gu Xiaoxiao a lesson. Gu Ning said no, she wanted to do it herself. Thus Hao Ran and his brothers stayed quiet. There were only Gu Ning and Gu Man in the patient room now. Mom, actually, I had a secret to tell you after this weekend, but since you had an accident, I believe it's better to tell you now. Gu Ning suddenly wore a serious face, which made Gu Man feel nervous. I rescued a person several days ago. He gave me an emerald as a reward. I sold it the other day. Unexpectedly, the emerald is worth 10 million yuan, Gu Ning said. She behaved like it was a great surprise to her. What? 10 million yuan? Hearing that, Gu Man was stunned. She couldn't believe her ears. Yes, 10 million. Therefore, you don't need to worry about the cost at all. We have enough money, Gu Ning said. I plan to take a look at houses these days and tell you after I bought the house, but the accident happened. Well, I also plan to use a part of the money to do business. Mu Ko runs a jewelry store, which is profitable. I think I'll buy in some shares. Gu Ning lied about the shares. She simply wanted to convince her mother by using Mu Ku. Gu Man was totally in shock now. She opened her mouth, but couldn't say a word. Gu Ning continued, and, after my car accident, my memory suddenly became really good. I can remember anything that I read. I was poor at studying in the past, but now, whatever I've read, I can keep it in my mind. I think it's easy for me to get into the best university in the capital city too. Besides, it will be a waste if I don't use my skill to do business. At the end, Gu Ning didn't forget to compliment herself. At short notice, Gu Man cried. No one knew whether she cried out of horror, happiness, or because of something else. Mom, Gu Ning was a little nervous. She knew it was hard for Gu Man to accept the truth, but she was going to tell her the news sooner or later. I'm fine. Ning Ning, you're finally growing better and better. Mom is truly happy for you. Other than happiness, Gu Man also had mixed emotions, especially sadness. Gu Man was happy that Gu Ning was growing better. However, those rich kids all lived a life without any worries, while Gu Ning started to do business. Gu Man blamed herself for being useless. She did not provide her daughter with a good life. Oh, how did you rescue the person? Were you in danger? Is it reliable that the person gave you such an expensive object? Will you be in any trouble later? Gu Man asked in worry. She cared about her daughter's safety most. It's fine. The person is super rich. He won't care about it. I met him today. It was him who drove me to the hospital, Gu Ning said. Gu Ning tried to make the man sound like a good guy to comfort Gu Man. She didn't lie though. Although the man was cold, he didn't seem like a bad guy. After that, Gu Man was finally relieved. Mom, my second aunt always helps us. I plan to buy a house for her family too. I want to help them, Gu Ning said. Hearing that, Gu Man felt like crying again. She was so touched by Gu Ning's kindness. Great, great. Ning Ning, Mom feels so proud of you for being grateful. Gu Man also wanted to thank the family of Gu Qing. She would never forget their help. But Mom, I want you to know something now. I will only take the family of my second aunt as my relatives in the Gu family. As for my eldest and third uncle, both you and I know how they treat us. Accordingly, even if I become rich in the future, I won't help them if they need my help. As for grandmother, although I hate her, you're her daughter after all. It's our responsibility to support her, but I'll decide how much we should support her financially. If grandmother is greedy, I won't tolerate her either, Gu Ning said solemnly. She wouldn't give in. Actually, through all those years, Gu Man already felt hurt by the rest of the people in the Gu family. Thus she agreed on what Gu Ning had said. Great, Mom agrees with you, Gu Man answered without further hesitation. Gu Ning was relieved when Gu Man agreed. She had been worried that Gu Man would forget the humiliation and disdain only because those bad people were family. Oh, please don't tell my second aunt that I'm going to buy them a house. Tell them when the thing is done, Gu Ning said. Sure, Gu Man replied. Get your Avrite ovals at no/v/e/lbn.com. Besides, Muku is going to City G to deal with some business this weekend. Mixie and I will go with him as well. We're going to learn. Please don't worry about me. I'll take good care of myself. Gu Ning again used Muku and Mixie as an excuse to comfort Gu Man. Although Gu Man was concerned, she didn't stop Gu Ning. She felt Gu Ning had grown up and was able to make decisions on her own. Since she had a plan, Gu Man believed that she shouldn't burden her daughter. Mom, I also hope you don't need to work that hard. Thus, why don't you quit? I have enough money now, and I'm going to earn more. I can support you now. You can go shop, take care of your skin, buy some makeup, or travel. Mom, I want you to enjoy your life. If you still want to work, you can tell me what you like to do. I can buy a small shop for you. We'll hire someone to run the shop. If you feel bored, you can go and take a look. If you don't want to, you can stay at home, Gu Ning added. To further make Gu Man feel comfortable in her heart, Gu Ning continued. Mom, we're mother and daughter. We're a family. Mine is yours. Please don't feel guilty at all. I'll be happy as long as you're happy. Gu Man felt guilty at the beginning. She blamed herself for not offering a good life to Gu Ning and even let Gu Ning support her financially. But what Gu Ning had said at the end lifted all her mental burdens. What Gu Man wanted most was for Gu Ning to be happy. Since Gu Ning wanted her to do so, Gu Man chose to listen to her daughter. Gu Man wouldn't really do anything, but since their life had been improved, she could change her lifestyle. Great, I'll quit my job, and I'll depend on you from now on, Gu Man joked. Sure, we'll live a better and better life from now on. Gu Ning was finally relieved. Gu Xiaoxiao's family lived in a big house in an expensive area near the downtown. After the evening class, Gu Xiaoxiao went back home, complaining to her mother Lin Lijuan, Mom, Gu Ning said she won't apologize to me. Lin Lijuan was about 45 years old, but she had taken good care of her skin and looked much younger. Lin Lijuan had a son and a daughter. Her son was named Gu Qingyun and was 20 years old. He was a sophomore majoring in medicine in the Capital Medical University. Her daughter was Gu Xiaoxiao. What? How could she be so bold? Isn't she afraid of us? Lin Lijuan was surprised. She's so bold now. She even fought with Hao Ran in our school today. Gu Xiaoxiao said. However, she didn't mention that Gu Ning was Hao Ran's boss now. She didn't want the rest of the people in the Gu family to think Gu Ning was better now. What? Hearing that, Lin Lijuan was shocked. Gu Ning was so different now. Lin Lijuan knew who Hao Ran was. Hao Ran was from a powerful family. She had even asked Gu Xiaoxiao to have a good relationship with the boy. It could be helpful someday in the future. Lin Lijuan also knew Hao Ran had a bad temper. It wasn't easy to get along with him. After the shock, Lin Lijuan laughed. I think that's good. She has bad blood with Hao Ran. She's doomed. Lin Lijuan didn't believe Gu Ning could defeat Hao Ran. She assumed Gu Ning was the loser. But Gu Xiaoxiao almost told her mother that Gu Ning was Hao Ran's boss now, but she restricted herself. But Gu Ning won't apologize to me. I hate her. What happened? What happened with Gu Ning? Before Lin Lijuan could say something, an old woman's voice sounded. Get your Avrite ovals at no/v/e/lbn.com. Then, a 60-year-old woman walked out from the passage. This woman was Gu Ning's grandmother. Gu Ning's grandmother lived a good life, so she was still as energetic as always. She was a stubborn old lady, but didn't dare to stand up against Lin Lijuan. Although Lin Lijuan was pushy, she would ignore her mother-in-law as long as she was in control. All in all, Lin Lijuan and her mother-in-law got along well with each other. Gu Ning's grandmother had visited her relatives yesterday, so she had no idea about what had happened between Gu Ning and Gu Xiaoxiao. Grandma, Gu Ning hit me with a plate yesterday in the canteen. She even slapped me, and won't apologize. I'm so annoyed, Gu Xiaoxiao complained at once when she saw her grandmother. What? Gu Ning dared to hit you with a plate and slapped you. She's such a bastard. The old lady was in a rage. Actually, in the old lady's eyes, Gu Ning was a humiliation to the Gu family because she didn't have a father. Gu Ning hated her grandmother too, because her grandmother had been calling her a bastard ever since she had been a little girl. Exactly. Grandma, could you please kick them out of the old house? Gu Xiaoxiao begged. She looked vicious. Well, the old lady was a little reluctant to do that. She disliked Gu Ning and Gu Man very much, but never thought of kicking them out. After all, Gu Man was her daughter. She felt sympathetic to her. Most importantly, before her husband had passed away, he had warned her not to kick Gu Man and Gu Ning out of the old house, or he would come to her even if he had to become a ghost when he was dead. Gu Ning's grandmother believed in superstitions, so she never had the idea of kicking Gu Man and Gu Ning out. Seeing her grandmother wasn't willing to do that, Gu Xiaoxiao knew it couldn't work. She then changed her mind. Grandma, could you ask Gu Ning to apologize to me? As long as I'm satisfied, I can forgive her. No problem. I will call Gu Ning right now and tell her to apologize to you. This time, the old lady didn't reject, but pulled out her phone at once. But the old lady didn't have Gu Ning's phone number because she hated Gu Ning so much, so she could only call Gu Man. It was around 10 p.m. and wasn't very late. Gu Ning and Gu Man hadn't gone to bed yet. They were watching TV. At that moment, Gu Man's phone rang. It was her mother. Before she could say a word, her mother shouted in anger, Gu Man, what a daughter you have. How dare she hit Xiaoxiao with a plate and even slap her? A bastard is a bastard. She has no manners at all. Ask Gu Ning to apologize to Xiaoxiao until Xiaoxiao is satisfied. It was an irresistible order. Gu Man's mother almost yelled, so Gu Ning could hear her clearly. Gu Ning actually didn't care how her grandmother thought of her, but she couldn't stand her grandmother calling her a bastard. Gu Man knew it wasn't Gu Ning's fault. She felt aggrieved. And hearing her mother call her daughter a bastard, Gu Man was hurt. Although Gu Man was weak, she cared about her daughter. She would not allow her daughter to be called a bastard. This time, Gu Man was totally annoyed. She almost roared with tears, Mom, Ningning is not a bastard. She's my daughter. Even though you dislike her, you can't swear at her in that way. You can't just believe Xiaoxiao's words. Ningning didn't hurt her at all. Besides, it wasn't Ningning's fault. It was Xiaoxiao who humiliated Ningning first. Why should Ningning apologize? The old lady was surprised by Gu Man's emotional outburst. She didn't get her mind back till a while had passed. Then she was more irritated than surprised. Gu Ning is a bastard. I won't admit she's my granddaughter. She must apologize to Xiaoxiao, or you both have to leave the old house. The old lady was actually so mad that she had blurted out what Gu Xiaoxiao wanted. She didn't really want to kick Gu Man and Gu Ning out. She just wanted to threaten them. Gu Xiaoxiao, who stood aside, was gloating over her victory. "Mom," Gu Man called helplessly. She wanted to argue back, but burst into tears and could barely say a word. Gu Ning immediately grabbed the phone from Gu Man. She said coldly, "You old bitch, let me tell you something. I will not apologize. Do you want to kick us out of this old house? Fine, we'll move out, but remember what you said today. I'm not your granddaughter. No matter what happens to you all in the future, it's none of my business." Then, Gu Ning hung up with great force. Gu Man didn't stop or blame Gu Ning. Her heart was completely broken due to her mother's attitude towards them. On the other side, the old lady was trembling in anger, swearing at Gu Ning loudly. "Li Juan, if Gu Man and Gu Ning won't move out tomorrow, you can find someone to kick them out." The old lady had intended to threaten Gu Man so that Gu Ning would apologize to Gu Xiaoxiao. But now that Gu Ning had yelled at her, the old lady decided to kick them out of the old house. Meanwhile, both Gu Xiaoxiao and Lin Lijuan were excited. They had no sympathy for Gu Man and Gu Ning at all. In the hospital. "Mom, let's stay in the hospital these days. I'll go to the old house and bring our important stuff back tomorrow. And I'll buy a new house as soon as possible, then we can move in," Gu Ning said. Although Gu Ning had already decided to buy a house in Fenghua Luxury Mansion, she needed to go to City G to earn more money first. Great. Gu Man listened to Gu Ning on everything now. Since Gu Man stayed in a VIP patient room, nurses would take good care of her. Moreover, and Qian also accorded special attention to Gu Man. Gu Ning didn't need to worry about her mother. The next morning, Gu Ning went back to her school. Gu Xiaoxiao went to school early too. She couldn't wait to make fun of Gu Ning. Although Gu Ning was still mad about what had happened yesterday, she continued to finish her daily routine. She, along with Mu Ke and Yu Mixi, were running in the early morning. This time Hao Ran, Qin Zixuan and Zhang Tianping also joined them. Gu Ning didn't specifically tell them how many circles to run because they were all active in training. Hao Ran and his brothers even performed better than Mu Ke. This morning, Yu Mixi followed them running at the same pace for a circle. She slowed down obviously in the second circle. By the third circle, she was jogging. At last, Yu Mixi still finished 5 circles, which amounted to 2,000 meters. Mu Ke finished 8 circles while Hao ran together with his brothers followed Gu Ning and finished 10 circles. Follow Yu's stories at nvl/by/n.com. After the running, Hao Ran and his brothers were all exhausted. They sank down to the ground immediately. Gu Ning was in a better condition than them. She was a little tired, but not worn out. Her body was still in her control. At the beginning, Gu Ning's speed and steps stayed steady, but after 7 or 8 circles, she obviously slowed down. She wasn't physically strong after all. In her last lifetime, she could still catch her breath after dozens of kilometers. She had trained herself day by day to get a strong body in her last lifetime. In this lifetime, she was determined to train herself continuously to have a strong body. After a long break, Hao Ran and his brothers were able to utter a word. "Be boss." How come you don't seem exhausted?" Hao Ran asked with great admiration. "Exactly." Qin Zixuan and Zhang Tianping agreed. "As long as you keep on exercising, you'll get stronger and stronger. You can all do it easily in the future," Gu Ning encouraged them. Yes, as long as you kept on exercising, you would get stronger and stronger. Dozens of kilometers wouldn't be a difficult task to finish. Anyone with determination could do that. Hearing that, all the boys were excited. "I will keep on training and be stronger." "Me too." "Me too." "All right, I have something to deal with this afternoon." "You can do whatever you want," Gu Ning said. She needed to go to the old house to take some important stuff, then she would never walk into it again. "Boss, are you going to the hospital to visit your mother?" "We'll go with you." The boys all believed Gu Ning was going to visit Gu Man. "No thanks. I'm not going to the hospital," Gu Ning refused. She didn't want to say anything further. Hao Ran and his brothers then closed their mouth. Gu Ning and her friends went back to their classroom several minutes before the morning class began. The 7th classroom was on the 2nd floor. Hao Ran and his brothers went to their classroom when they arrived at the 2nd floor. Gu Ning and the other two went straight to the third floor. The minute they went upstairs, they saw Gu Xiaoxiao leaning against the railings alone. The three of them were all angry because they knew Gu Xiaoxiao was the cause of Gu Man's fall. Gu Ning immediately knew the reason why Gu Xiaoxiao was here. She wanted to make fun of Gu Ning. But to Gu Ning's surprise, Chen Xiao, Qin Zheng and their friends were absent. In fact, Chen Xiao hadn't come to school yet and Qin Zheng and his friends seemed to be a little afraid of Gu Ning, so they didn't come either. Gu Xiaoxiao enjoyed her victory so much that she even ignored the anger of Mu Ku along with others. She laughed when she saw Gu Ning. Gu Ning. I told you to apologize to me, and you wouldn't listen to me. How dare you yell at our grandma? Well, grandma demands that you and your mother move out of the old house today or you'll be kicked out. Hearing that, Mu Ku and Yu Mixi rounded their eyes in shock. What? If Gu Ning didn't apologize, she would be kicked out. At the beginning they had thought Gu Xiaoxiao must be bragging. The Gu family wouldn't kick Gu Ning and her mother out because of such a small disagreement. Unexpectedly, the Gu family did. That was so vicious. I will move out before tomorrow, Gu Ning said calmly. Gu Xiaoxiao didn't expect Gu Ning could still remain calm now. She was disappointed that she failed to see Gu Ning being nervous and terrified. Gu Xiaoxiao believed Gu Ning must be pretending and she wanted to tear Gu Ning's disguise apart. Thus, even though Gu Ning had promised she would move out, Gu Xiaoxiao still didn't want to leave Gu Ning alone. Gu Ning, even though you don't care about yourself, how can you not care about your mother? The rent outside is so high. Can you afford it? If you apologize to me till I'm satisfied, I can ask grandma to let you stay, Gu Xiaoxiao continued. She was eager to let Gu Ning beg her. She wanted to stay proud before Gu Ning. In Gu Xiaoxiao's eyes, Gu Ning could never be better than her. Gu Xiaoxiao wanted to bully and make fun of Gu Ning forever. Now Gu Ning dared to stand up against her, which was unacceptable to Gu Xiaoxiao. Gu Xiaoxiao, stop it. How Ran and his brothers along with me won't let our boss be homeless. Mu Ku couldn't tolerate it any longer. He criticized Gu Xiaoxiao at once. Gu Xiaoxiao was annoyed. She didn't expect Mu Ku and other boys would treat Gu Ning so well. Why? Why was Gu Ning so lucky? No, she couldn't accept it. Gu Xiaoxiao's eyes were full of jealousy. She deliberately raised her voice. Gu Ning, how could you be so shameless and behave like a mistress who relies on a man to support her? Gu Xiaoxiao's voice immediately attracted lots of attention. At the same time, Gu Ning became mad. Before Gu Xiaoxiao could finish, Gu Ning raised her hand and slapped Gu Xiaoxiao with a snap sound. Gu Xiaoxiao shouted in pain. Gu Xiaoxiao was struck dumb. She was surprised that Gu Ning dared to hit her, even though it wasn't the first time. Gu Ning looked at Gu Xiaoxiao coldly. Her sight was like a sharp icy knife. Gu Xiaoxiao was frightened at once. Moreover, the intense cold which spread from Gu Ning surrounded Gu Xiaoxiao, making her tremble. Gu Ning said with solemnity, Gu Xiaoxiao, who told you I rely on a man to support me? Don't spread that rumor, or I'll sue you for slander. Gu Xiaoxiao tried to retort, but Gu Ning raised her hand again. Two palms fell heavily on Gu Xiaoxiao's face with two snapping sounds. This time, Gu Ning used even more strength than the last time. Gu Xiaoxiao's cheeks swelled at once. She screamed in pain, Gu Ning, why did you hit me? Gu Xiaoxiao's scream was heard by all the students on the third floor. The morning class hadn't begun yet and the students all ran out to see what was going on. Gu Xiaoxiao was a beautiful girl who was from a rich family. She was also a student in the top classroom. Many students had heard of her name. As for Gu Ning, after what had happened yesterday, she gained great fame among her schoolmates. Everyone knew who these two girls were. Following Gu Xiaoxiao's question, the crowd looked to Gu Ning, wanting to know the reason why Gu Ning hit Gu Xiaoxiao. Gu Ning ignored the attention from the onlookers. She coldly said to Gu Xiaoxiao instead, because you sent photos of me in a fight to my mother yesterday. My mother had been scared and fell down the stairs. You're lucky that my mother wasn't hurt seriously, or it would cost more than 2 palms. Hearing that, everyone knew the context. Since Gu Xiaoxiao deserved this, no one felt sympathy for her. Gu Xiaoxiao was shocked by Gu Ning's explanation. She didn't expect it would end up like that. She merely wanted Gu Man to criticize Gu Ning. Meanwhile, she didn't feel guilty at all. She only felt a little upset because she had hurt someone. Gu Xiaoxiao, stop crossing the line. I will not feel sorry about what I do to you from now on, Gu Ning warned her at the end. Then she walked away directly. Mu Ke and Yu Mixi glared at Gu Xiaoxiao, then left too. After Gu Ning was gone, the crowd started to discuss immediately. How could Gu Xiaoxiao be so vicious? It's none of her business that Gu Ning fought with others. How could she send Gu Ning's mother a message to terrify her? Gu Ning's mother even fell down the stairs. Exactly. She even said Gu Ning relies on a boy to support her. She deserved to be hit. Most of the students chose to believe Gu Ning because Gu Ning seemed so angry. Why would Qin Jing like such a vicious girl? An admirer of Qin Jing said with dissatisfaction. He probably just likes her appearance. Birds of a feather flock together. I've seen Qin Jing pick on Gu Ning. Yeah. I've seen that too. This time, Qin Jing was also criticized by the crowd. He deserved it too. You people, Gu Xiaoxiao was so mad, and she couldn't tolerate herself being criticized before everyone. She ran downstairs crying. She had been slapped 3 times by Gu Ning. Her cheeks were red and swollen. She felt too embarrassed to go back to her classroom, so she went back home afterwards. When Gu Xiaoxiao ran away, the bell rang. Everyone immediately went inside their classrooms. Gu Xiaoxiao met the head teacher of the first classroom on her way out of the teaching building. The head teacher was named Wang Qingqi. He was a serious man with glasses, in his early 40s. Wang Qingqi was about to question Gu Xiaoxiao about where she was going when the morning classes began, but he noticed the red marks on her cheeks. He was a little surprised. Gu Xiaoxiao, what happened to your face? Seeing Wang Qingqi, Gu Xiaoxiao was slightly unwilling to tell the truth at first, but then she still explained, it's Gu Ning from the 4th classroom. I had an argument with her, and she slapped me 3 times. I feel too embarrassed to go back to my classroom. The reason why Gu Xiaoxiao wasn't willing to tell Wang Qingqi the truth was that she knew Wang Qingqi was an upright person. Gu Xiaoxiao wasn't hopeful that Wang Qingqi would stand up for her. Although Gu Xiaoxiao was selfish and didn't feel guilty at all about what she had done to Gu Ning, she wasn't dumb. She knew this time was her fault. Thus Gu Xiaoxiao knew clearly that it wouldn't be helpful even though she told the teacher. That was also the reason why she had turned to her family instead of her teacher for help when Gu Ning had hit her with a plate last time. Her family would always protect her no matter what she had done. Indeed, Wang Qingqi and Zhang Qiuhua were the same kind of teacher. They both were honest and never yield to power or wealth. Accordingly, though feeling displeased, Wang Qingqi didn't criticize Gu Ning at once. Gu Xiaoxiao had said herself that Gu Ning had slapped her because of an argument. Top VL updates on n/o/v/lb/in.com. Either because Gu Ning was bad-tempered or because Gu Xiaoxiao had irritated her, Gu Ning had slapped Gu Xiaoxiao. Wang Qingqi got to know about Gu Ning on the school's forum yesterday as well. Although he didn't like students who fought, he had to admit Gu Ning was powerful to be able to defeat 3 boys. Do you think you've done anything wrong in this argument? Wang Qingqi asked. If Gu Xiaoxiao had not done anything wrong, he would help her, otherwise he would not get involved. Gu Xiaoxiao was so eager to say she had done nothing wrong, but she changed her mind. I did say something terrible. Hearing that, Wang Qingqi immediately understood. Then go back home and use ice blocks to cover your face. You'll recover soon. Then, Gu Xiaoxiao left. But after a second, Gu Xiaoxiao called her mother Lin Lijuan and complained. She told Lin Lijuan that Gu Ning had just slapped her 3 times. She didn't say why Gu Ning had slapped her, of course. No matter why Gu Ning had slapped her, Lin Lijuan would always blame Gu Ning. The bloody bitch. Bastard! How dare she slap my lovely daughter? Sweetie, you come back home now. I'll never let her get away with it, Lin Lijuan said in great anger. The minute Lin Lijuan hung up, she called Gu Man. Gu Man was asleep at that time. The ringtone woke her up. Gu Man took a look at the phone. The caller was Lin Lijuan. She didn't want to answer it because she knew Lin Lijuan wasn't a kind person. However, the phone continued to ring. Gu Man had to answer it at the end. What? Gu Man asked coldly. Gu Man, your daughter slapped Xiaoxiao this morning. If you don't bring Gu Ning to apologize to Xiaoxiao, I'll make you both pay for it. Lin Lijuan shouted. Gu Man was a little surprised at first, then immediately realized what had happened. She didn't blame Gu Ning at all, but questioned Lin Li Juan, "Do you know why Ning Ning has slapped Xiao Xiao? Do you think Ning Ning must be bullied and stay quiet, while Xiao Xiao is superior to my daughter?" Lin Li Juan didn't feel guilty at all. She said with arrogance, "Of course. Gu Ning can't compare with Xiao Xiao. Xiao Xiao is our dear daughter, while Gu Ning is merely a bastard." Lin Li Juan. Gu Man's face turned red in anger. She shouted, "Stop calling Ning Ning a bastard. She is my daughter. So what? She doesn't have a father anyway. She's a bastard," Lin Li Juan continued. Gu Man was deeply hurt, but couldn't argue back. She hung up and burst into tears. Ning Ning had a father. They hadn't been abandoned. Ning Ning's father had only passed away. Lin Li Juan was hung up on by Gu Man. She was so annoyed that she almost smashed her phone. After a while, she called again because she wasn't done yet. However, Gu Man wouldn't answer the call. Lin Li Juan even used Gu Man's mother's phone to call her. Gu Man wouldn't answer either. Both Lin Li Juan and Gu Man's mother were in a rage now. How dare they do that? Are they going to leave the Gu family? Do they think they can survive without us? Gu Man's mother snapped. If Gu Man and Gu Ning had heard their talk, they would laugh out in anger. For the past dozens of years, the Gu family had never helped them. Gu Man and Gu Ning had always depended on themselves. And the old house was left by Gu Man's father. Besides, Gu Man paid the rent. Qin Jing texted Gu Xiaoxiao because she didn't come to classes. He then found out that Gu Ning had slapped Gu Xiaoxiao, and Gu Xiaoxiao went back home afterwards. Knowing Gu Ning had slapped Gu Xiaoxiao, Qin Jing was mad at Gu Ning. But he wasn't as angry as he thought he would be. He didn't know why. In the fourth classroom, Xiao Feifei stared at Gu Ning unkindly as usual, and Gu Ning still ignored her. After the morning class, Chu Peihan walked into the fourth classroom in anger towards Gu Ning. Everyone believed Chu Peihan was here to pick on Gu Ning. Some felt worried for Gu Ning while some were waiting to see a drama. Basically only Xiao Feifei and her friends couldn't wait to see the drama. Updates tnvel/by.com. However, Gu Ning glanced at Chu Peihan calmly. She didn't believe Chu Peihan was going to cause her any trouble. Chu Peihan went to Gu Ning, standing and staring at her from a higher position. She looked mad. "Congratulations, Gu Ning. I had just left the school for 2 days, and you suddenly become the center. Now no one cares about me as the most powerful girl in the school." Gu Ning leaned backward slightly. Her arms crossed before her chest. She looked at ease, then asked airily, So? Everyone thought there would be a fight. However, they were terribly wrong. "So, I must join you. I call you boss, and you teach me how to fight. Of course, if you need my support, feel free to let me know," Chu Peihan said with great sincerity. Everyone was shocked. They were not going to fight? How was it possible? Why did they suddenly become a group? It was totally unacceptable to Xiao Feifei and her friends. Why was Gu Ning so lucky to have all those students who were from powerful families be her friends? Okay. Gu Ning didn't reject. It was exactly what Chu Peihan had hoped. She was excited now. Chu Peihan used a pen on Gu Ning's desk to write down numbers on her notebook. "This is my phone number. Text me." Then, she turned around and left. When Gu Xiaoxiao got home, her grandmother and mother saw her red, swollen cheeks, and both of them hated Gu Ning to death. At a break between classes, the head teacher asked Gu Ning about her mother's health. Gu Ning didn't hide the truth. She just didn't tell her teacher the reason why her mother fell down. The moment that morning classes were over, Gu Ning left her school taking a taxi to the old house. She packed up some important stuff, throwing some abandoned stuff into the trash bin, then left. Gu Ning went to a delivery company first. She addressed the key to her grandmother before she went to the hospital. When she arrived at the hospital, it was already 1:40 p.m. It was 50 minutes away from the afternoon classes. Gu Ning didn't have much time. She left after she had a small talk with her mother. She would wait till the evening class was over, then talk with her mother. It was already Thursday. Gu Ning planned to go to City G the next afternoon. She had booked a plane ticket and hotel on the internet yesterday. She would fly to City G at 7:30 p.m. tomorrow and arrive there around 8:30 p.m. A few hours later, Gu Ning's grandmother received the key. The second the old lady saw the key, she almost lost her breath. She didn't expect Gu Man and Gu Ning would really do that. Although the old lady was harsh, she wouldn't kick them out if Gu Man along with Gu Ning apologized to Gu Xiaoxiao. However, Gu Man and Gu Ning would move out rather than apologize. Well, very well. Let's see how tough they can be. The old lady clenched her teeth in anger. She believed Gu Man and Gu Ning would move to Gu Qing's place because they were close. Thus, the old lady immediately called Gu Qing and forbade her to help Gu Man and Gu Ning. Gu Xiaoxiao was greatly pleased that Gu Ning and her mother moved out of the old house. She would never forget that Gu Ning had slapped her 3 times this morning. Gu Qing didn't know what had happened until her mother called her, but Gu Man hadn't actually contacted her. Besides, Gu Qing was irritated when her mother forbade her to help Gu Man. Gu Qing seldom dared to argue with her mother, but this time she could stand it. Mom, Gu Man is your biological daughter after all. How could you be so cruel? She thought her mother simply disliked Gu Man and Gu Ning, but didn't expect her mother would be so cold-blooded. Her mother always liked sons over daughters. She and her sister Gu Man never had much of their mother's love. In addition to that, they had been bullied by their brothers and had even done all the housework throughout their childhood. If it hadn't been for their father, they probably would not even have attended school. Gu Qing hadn't been good at studying and had given up on receiving an education after high school. As for Gu Man, she had dropped out of her college because she had gotten pregnant. The old lady didn't expect Gu Qing would dare to argue with her. She shouted in anger, "I don't need you to teach me. If you ever take me as your mother, follow my order." Gu Man and her daughter deserve this. Let's see how tough they can be. Then, the old lady hung up with great force. Gu Qing was hurt by her mother's behavior. She decided not to listen to her mother. She was also worried Gu Man and Gu Qing would be homeless. She called Gu Man at once, providing help for them. Although there were only 2 rooms in her house, she thought it was acceptable to let Gu Man and Gu Ning live in one. Gu Man didn't reject Gu Qing's call. After Gu Man found out Gu Qing already knew they had moved out of the old house, Gu Man told Gu Qing she was in hospital. Knowing Gu Man had had an accident, Gu Qing couldn't wait to visit her. Though it was just an hour before Gu Qing was off duty, she asked for leave and went straight to the hospital. Gu Qing didn't find out that Gu Man stayed in a VIP patient room until she arrived. She was extremely astonished. Gu Ning had told her mother not to tell Gu Qing the truth for now, thus Gu Man only explained to Gu Qing that a doctor in this hospital was Gu Ning's friend. Gu Ning had done the doctor a big favor, and the doctor had arranged everything. As for why they had moved out of the old house, Gu Man didn't hide it and told Gu Qing the whole story because they were close sisters. After that, Gu Qing was really mad at her mother as well as Lin Lijuan and Gu Xiaoxiao. She also believed Gu Ning shouldn't apologize. Gu Xiaoxiao had been so selfish and overbearing. She deserved the slaps. Although Gu Ning would have bad blood with the Gu family and had even moved out from the old house, Gu Qing was happy to see Gu Ning could fight back. Gu Qing was actually concerned that Gu Ning would suffer more if she continuously behaved like a coward. Gu Man, you and Ning Ning can stay in my place. It takes time to find a new house. You don't need to rush, Gu Qing said. Don't worry about us. I have to stay in the hospital for a few days. Ning Ning and I will temporarily stay here. We're finding a new place now. I believe we'll have a new home after a few days, Gu Man explained. Fine. Gu Qing didn't insist. Diascover dated novels on NOV/E/Lbin.co. Oh, please don't tell others I stay here. Please keep it to yourself, Gu Man said. I understand. Don't worry, Gu Qing answered. She wouldn't tell others. After the afternoon classes were over, Gu Ning, Yu Mixi, Mu Ku, Hao Ran and his brothers along with Chu Pei Han gathered together. Other than Yu Mixi, the others were all surprised. Wow. Brothers and sisters, come on, let's have a WeChat group for communication. Chu Pei Han greeted the others the minute she saw them. Chu Pei Han was an outgoing girl. Although she wasn't familiar with Mu Ku or Hao Ran and his brothers, she didn't feel strange at all since they were in a group now. Hearing that, everyone knew Chu Pei-han had taken Gu Ning as her boss too. But they still looked to Gu Ning for confirmation. Gu Ning gave them an affirmative nod. Those young teenagers became good friends soon. Only Yu Mixi, who was introverted, stayed a little shy and quiet, but the others didn't ignore her, so Yu Mixi didn't feel lonely. She tried not to stay quiet and talked to the others gradually. After a while, everyone added each other's WeChat accounts. They even had a WeChat group called Family of Fighters. Gu Ning was speechless. Didn't it sound violent? Everyone else liked that name very much, so Gu Ning didn't say anything. Come on, the group leader needs to send us a big red envelope, Hao Ran encouraged. No problem, there you go. Chu Pei-han, the group leader, said. She sent out a big red envelope of 888 yuan. There were 7 people in the WeChat group, and everyone could get an uncertain amount of money depending on their luck. Gu Ning was the luckiest one. She got 300 yuan. Then was Yu Mixi, who got more than 200 yuan. Chu Pei-han and others shared the rest of the money. Hao Ran only got 3 yuan, and he complained. What? How could I be so unlucky? 3 yuan? You must be kidding me. After that, the crowd went to have a meal first, and then went to train in the small forest. Chu Pei-han hadn't witnessed how good Gu Ning's kung fu was yet, so she was excited to have a try. The minute they had arrived at the woods, she challenged Gu Ning to fight with her. Chu Pei-han was skillful at fighting. She had also had professional training and performed better than Hao Ran and his brothers. Therefore, Gu Ning didn't defeat Chu Pei-han immediately. However, after a few rounds, Chu Pei-han apparently wasn't able to continue. She lost in 10 moves. Although she had lost, Chu Pei-han didn't feel disappointed. Instead, she was more excited. If Gu Ning couldn't defeat her easily, it would be wrong to regard Gu Ning as her boss. Chu Pei-han was happy that she had chosen the right person. At the same time, Chu Pei-han had an idea. Gu Ning, I'm so eager to know who is better between you and my older brother. Could you have a try with my older brother someday? Sure. Gu Ning agreed. She also wanted to have a try with someone who was as powerful as herself. Chu Pei-han's older brother must be someone. Having Gu Ning's permission, Chu Pei-han was looking forward to it even more, but her older brother wasn't in City F now. He would be back after a week. In the following training, Chu Pei-han surprisingly found out that Gu Ning was very professional, just like her older brother. Meanwhile, she was more curious about Gu Ning. Was she really born in a poor single-parent family? Although she was curious, she had no intention to investigate Gu Ning, which would be disrespectful. Chu Pei-han didn't care what secret Gu Ning had. She still believed that she had made a good friend. Diascover dated novels on NOV/E/Lbin.co. In the evening class, a boy stopped Gu Ning when she was on her way back to the classroom. He was around 1.8 meters tall and kind of good-looking, but wore a serious face. Nonetheless, Gu Ning knew he was using a serious look to cover his nervousness. He wasn't here for trouble. But, Gu Ning felt confused. What was he doing here? The students, who sat under windows beside the passage, all looked over. They thought someone was here to cause Gu Ning trouble again. Xiao Feifei and her friends were excited to see that. However, what happened next made their jaws drop. Gu Ning, I like you. Would you like to go on a date with me? The boy asked. Hearing that, Gu Ning was struck dumb. She didn't expect the boy would say that he liked her. The crowd were all in shock. What? He liked her? Not for trouble? Sorry, Gu Ning rejected. She didn't want to date now, and the boy wasn't her type either. Besides, Gu Ning was a 25-year-old mature woman mentally. She wasn't interested in teenage boys. Why? The boy immediately inquired. No specific reason, Gu Ning replied. The boy didn't know what to say all of a sudden. After a second, he said, well, can we be friends then? If we get along well, we'll be friends naturally, but for now, we're merely strangers. It's too early to say we're friends. Gu Ning didn't reject, nor accept. The boy believed he still had hope, and was happy. Gu Ning, it's so nice to meet you. I'm an E from the 6th classroom. It's me who is being rude. I'm sorry, but I'll work hard to gain your approval, Annie said with sincerity. The bell rang at that time and the evening class began. Annie said goodbye to Guning, then left. Guning and Yumixi walked into their classroom at once. The minute Guning stepped in, Xiao Feifei's sight followed her all the way. Although she was terrified by Guning and how ran yesterday, she remained jealous as usual. It was hard for Xiao Feifei to understand why Guning had so many admirers. In her eyes, Guning was just a little prettier than ordinary people and wasn't a gorgeous beauty. Guning was also from a poor family and not good at studying either. But Mu Ku, the boy that Xiao Feifei liked, called Guning his boss. How could he do that? Xiao Feifei's blood was boiling. She had to think of some way to beat Guning. Those hoodlums had failed last time. Xiao Feifei wouldn't make the same mistake twice. As for Guning, she was used to Xiao Feifei's unkind looks and couldn't care less about it. After the evening class, Guning went straight to the hospital. She ran for about half an hour to get there. At that time, there were few people in the hospital yard. It was quiet and a little ghastly. When Guning got to the patient room, Gu Man told Guning that Gu Qing had visited her today. Gu Man also told Guning the reason why Gu Qing had come. She looked at Guning with great care. She was worried Guning would be sad. The old lady is so cruel. Guning sneered. She was mad, but not sad at all. Her anger wasn't from the old lady's cruelty to her, but to Gu Man. Gu Man was the old lady's biological daughter after all. Guning always knew her grandmother liked sons over daughters, but she didn't expect the old lady would be so cold-blooded. And Gu Xiaoxiao was behind all of this. Gu Man signed resignedly. She was hurt deeper than Guning. Even though Guning had made mistakes, Gu Man would be mad or heartbroken. She would never hate her daughter, or even treat her badly. Gu Man would cherish her daughter more. Because Gu Man looked at Guning, then gradually became absent-minded. She seemed sad and as if she was missing someone. Guning knew Gu Man must be missing Guning's biological father. Was the resemblance that great? There was no hatred in Gu Man's eyes. Obviously, she was still in love with him. Guning was suddenly curious about her father. "Mom, could you tell me something about my father?" Guning asked. Gu Man was a little hesitated at first, then calmed down gradually. Ningning was 18 now. She couldn't keep it a secret from herself forever. She also didn't want Ningning to hate her biological father because of a misunderstanding. After a while, Gu Man opened her mouth. "Your father was a handsome man. He was tall, strong, smart and talented, but he lost his memory back then and he didn't even know who he was. I called him Ning afterwards. I'd saved his life by accident. He was injured then. After that, we fell in love and stayed together. Your father was sophisticated. He became a supervisor after half a year in a company, then was promoted to be a manager of the planning department. However, an accident happened when he was on a business trip. The bus fell into the river. There were 23 people in the bus. Only 5 survived. 12 bodies were found. 6 were missing, your father included. Missing amounted to death." Guning had believed the man had abandoned Gu Man, but the truth was totally different. "Ning, that was the reason why Gu Man named her daughter Guning. When I was with him, I felt the happiness I'd never had. Thus, I thought of committing suicide after he had that accident. I knew it was selfish. It was unfair to my loving parents and my elder sister. When I was full of those tangled emotions, I found out that I'd been pregnant for 3 months. Therefore, I continued my life and dropped out of the school. What had happened next wasn't a secret to Guning. Gu Man's mother thought it was humiliating that Gu Man was pregnant before getting married. She had asked Gu Man to have an abortion or she wouldn't admit that Gu Man was her daughter. Gu Man had chosen her child over her mother, thus she had left her home. She had then used money from her father to rent a house and try to find jobs. But she had been refused because of her pregnancy. After a few months, she had run out of money. Gu Man had to turn to Gu Qing for help afterwards. After Gu Man and left her home, her father and Gu Qing had searched for her in vain. It had been Gu Man who had turned to Gu Qing on her own initiative. Gu Man's father then picked Gu Man up and took her back home. Under her father's protection, Gu Man had successfully given birth to Guning. 18 years later, the old sadness was already gone, but Gu Man still felt unhappy every time she thought of those memories. The next day, Gu Ning got up early as usual. She ran to school, then continued to run with her friends. She didn't go back to her school until it was 5 minutes before the morning class. There weren't bathrooms in their school, so they couldn't take a bath even though they were all wet from that sweat. Luckily, they would take a shower when they went back home and they weren't smelly. "Boss, today's Friday. Let's go have some fun in our club tonight," Hao Ran said on the way back to their classrooms. "I like it. Gu Ning, go with us," Chu Peihan said with excitement. "Yeah. It's our place. It's safe," Qin Zixuan said. "We have a new kind of fruit drink. Girls love it. Boss, why not have a try?" Zhang Tianping added. "I need to go to City G this afternoon, sorry," Gu Ning replied. The crowd immediately felt disappointed. "Why are you going to City G?" Chu Peihan asked. "To deal with something," Gu Ning said. "Something about what?" Hao Ran inquired. "That's a secret," Gu Ning answered. Hearing that, they all felt bored, but since Gu Ning wasn't willing to tell, they stopped asking. "But, I'll buy gifts for you all," Gu Ning added. Knowing that, everyone was delighted again. "Sounds great." Although they all knew Gu Ning was from a poor family, they didn't reject her kindness because they believed Gu Ning wouldn't buy something expensive. Gifts showed affection and didn't need to be expensive. "If you're not staying in the hospital these 2 days, should we go visit your mother?" Mu Ke asked with care. "No, it's fine. And Qian will be there," Gu Ning said. Read lat.stchers on n/v/l/b.i.cm. Gu Ning absolutely wouldn't allow them to visit her mother because she had lied to Gu Man, saying that she was going to City G with Mu Ku. If they went to visit Gu Man would know the truth. At noon, Gu Ning received a message from Qin Jing. Qin Jing invited her to have a talk. Gu Ning didn't think there was any need to talk with Qin Jing. She had forgiven Qin Jing about the car accident, and that was the best she could do. If Qin Jing stayed away from her afterwards, then everything would be fine. If he still came to bother her, she wouldn't be kind to him. Gu Ning directly blocked Qin Jing's number. Qin Jing didn't get Gu Ning's answer and was displeased. He stopped sending messages to Gu Ning because he was mad. Recently, Qin Jing always had Gu Ning in his mind. He couldn't tell what his feelings for Gu Ning were now himself. When he heard Gu Ning and her mother had been kicked out by her grandmother because of Gu Xiaoxiao, he wanted to help. But Gu Ning ignored his message. Gu Xiaoxiao stayed away from Gu Ning today. She wanted to laugh at Gu Ning, but she was afraid that Gu Ning would beat her again. Xiao Feifei also kept a distance from Gu Ning today, except for her unkind looks. Gu Ning had a peaceful day today. She had already prepared everything she needed, so she took a taxi, heading to the airport directly after the afternoon classes were over. She had a backpack with her, and put all the documents inside her jade eyes. There was only a change of clothes in her backpack. She wanted to change when she arrived at the airport because she couldn't go to City G in her school uniform. It was the rush hour, and the roads were crowded downtown. When the car left downtown, it moved fast again. Gu Ning left her school at 5:50 p.m. and her plane would fly at 7:30. It took around 40 minutes to get to the airport. When Gu Ning arrived, it was already 6:40 p.m. 15 minutes were left, so Gu Ning wasn't in a hurry. She went to a washroom and changed her clothes. Jean shorts, a loose white t-shirt and a pair of white sneakers. Gu Ning pulled up her hair and looked energetic and attractive. Plus her flawless skin and her beautiful face. She was literally charming and shining. People around her would give her glances once in a while. Gu Ning didn't have time to buy new clothes, so she was wearing her old clothing. Luckily, Gu Man always treated Gu Ning well. Sometimes, Gu Man would buy some clothes of good quality to Gu Ning, like the outfit Gu Ning was wearing today. It wasn't expensive, but cost around 100 yuan. Gu Ning stood in line to take her ticket, then she was in the lounge. In the lounge, Gu Ning still had half an hour. It wasn't enough time for a meal, so Gu Ning planned to have a cup of coffee. Coincidentally, the minute Gu Ning walked in the cafe, she saw Qin Yifan with a young, beautiful lady. "Gu Ning, what a coincidence! Where are you going?" Qin Yifan beamed when Gu Ning appeared in his sight. He stood up in excitement, greeting Gu Ning. The lady beside Qin Yifan was a little unhappy. She checked Gu Ning out with an unkind look. She was jealous, especially when she found out Gu Ning had a charming appearance. Gu Ning had an acute mind. She immediately felt the unkindness from the lady, but she ignored it. Hi. What a coincidence. I'm going to City G. How about you? Gu Ning planned to have a good relationship with Qin Yifan, so she was friendly towards him. Of course, Gu Ning had no intention to disguise it. Wow, I'm flying to City G too. My plane will be leaving at 7:30 p.m., and you? Knowing Gu Ning was heading to City G, Qin Yifan was even more excited now. Others might even believe he liked Gu Ning. But for now, Qin Yifan only appreciated Gu Ning. There weren't many people whom Qin Yifan thought highly of, so he was excited when he met Gu Ning again. Me too. Gu Ning smiled. What a great coincidence. Come over here, we can take the plane together later, Qin Yifan invited her with passion. Gu Ning didn't reject. She followed Qin Yifan to his seat. Qin Yifan pulled out the chair for Gu Ning like a gentleman. The young lady seemed upset once more. What would you like to drink? Qin Yifan asked. Coffee please, Gu Ning replied. Qin Yifan called the waiter and ordered a cup of coffee for Gu Ning. Yifan, you haven't introduced the girl to me yet, the lady who sat aside opened her mouth. She called Qin Yifan in a deliberately intimate way. Then, Qin Yifan immediately turned to the lady. This is my friend, Gu Ning. Gu Ning, this is my uncle's daughter, Li Jinjin, he said to Gu Ning. Read lat stchers on n/v/l/b.i.cm. Nice to meet you, Miss Li. Although Gu Ning knew Li Jinjin disliked her, she greeted her politely since Li Jinjin didn't actually hurt her yet. Nice to meet you too, Miss Gu, Li Jinjin replied. She hadn't figured out the relations between Gu Ning and Qin Yifan and didn't want to be rude. After that, Li Jinjin looked at Qin Yifan. I think Miss Gu is around 18 years old, right? Yifan, I'm curious, how did you meet Miss Gu? I told you this afternoon. I bought a king's green in the size of a quail's egg from a female student. The female student is Gu Ning, Qin Yifan said. Saying that, Qin Yifan couldn't help but show his appreciation of Gu Ning. Oh, that! Knowing that, Li Jinjin was surprised. At the same time, she was upset because she clearly saw Qin Yifan's appreciation of the female student. She liked Qin Yifan and had even told him plainly several times, but Qin Yifan explained that he only regarded her as his sister. When Qin Yifan was with her, he always seemed serious. However, when he was with the female student, Gu Ning, he behaved so passionately. Li Jinjin was jealous. Oh, Gu Ning, what are you going to do in City G? Qin Yifan asked. Just for a trip, Gu Ning answered. Where are you going to stay? Qin Yifan asked with care. I'll stay in the Huangdang Hotel in downtown, Gu Ning replied. Huangdang Hotel was a 5-star luxury hotel in City G. It cost hundreds of yuan to stay there for a night, but Gu Ning chose to stay there for a reason. The hotel would arrange a free tailored car for its customers all day. In an unfamiliar city, Gu Ning wasn't willing to rent a car, nor wait for a taxi. It was much more convenient to have a full-time chauffeur. Besides, she didn't lack money now. Great, I'll pass by the Huangdang Hotel later. Do you need a lift? Qin Yifan said. Yifan, hearing that, Li Jinjin was more displeased now. They wouldn't pass by the Huangdang Hotel at all. Actually, the Huangdang Hotel was far away from their destination. It would be late at night when they arrived at City G. If they were going to the Huangdang Hotel before going back home, they would have to waste more time on the road. Li Jinjin actually didn't care about the time. She simply disliked Gu Ning. If Gu Ning had been one of Qin Yifan's male friends, she wouldn't care at all. But before Li Jinjin could say another word, Qin Yifan stopped her with a glance. Li Jinjin was a little mad now, but she closed her mouth, because she didn't want to ruin her elegant appearance. Gu Ning obviously knew what was going on here. Even though it was convenient for Qin Yifan to give her a ride, Gu Ning had no intention to let him do that. Thus she refused, "Thank you so much, but the hotel will pick me up." Well, fine. If Gu Ning had said she would take a taxi, Qin Yifan would have insisted on driving her to the hotel, but since the hotel would pick her up, he didn't insist. When will you be going back? If you have time, you can ask me out. I can take you for a tour since I'm free all day, Qin Yifan said with delight. He totally forgot he was going to City G to deal with some business. Li Jinjin was eager to interrupt, but Gu Ning opened her mouth first. I'm going to deal with something there, and I'll be back the day after tomorrow. Which meant she didn't have time. Before long, their plane was about to take off. Gu Ning's and Qin Yifan's seat were all in the first class. Li Jinjin felt extremely unhappy. As long as Gu Ning was present, Qin Yifan would talk to her and ignore Li Jinjin. Gu Ning had actually wanted to buy a ticket in economy class, but the economy class was all booked. Gu Ning then had to buy a ticket in the first class. Qin Yifan, Li Jinjin and Gu Ning all sat on the second row. Gu Ning sat beside the aisle. Qin Yifan's seat was beside the window, but he exchanged with Li Jinjin to sit next to Gu Ning. Li Jinjin was annoyed. If not for her appearance, she would probably argue with Qin Yifan now. Gu Ning actually didn't want to talk much with Qin Yifan, especially in front of Li Jinjin. She didn't want to cause any misunderstandings or trouble. Therefore, when the plane moved up high to the sky, Gu Ning closed her eyes to have a rest. Qin Yifan didn't bother Gu Ning anymore. Gu Ning didn't close her eyes all the way, because it wouldn't be natural. An hour later, the plane landed at the airport of City G. Gu Ning and Qin Yifan walked out of the airport then separated. Gu Ning found the car from the hotel. She got in and headed straight to the hotel. When she arrived at the hotel, it was already 9:40 p.m. She checked in, walking upstairs directly. The minute Gu Ning stepped in the right elevator, the left elevator opened and several men walked out. The front man was Leng Xiaoting. Gu Ning missed Leng Xiaoting by seconds. It wasn't a big deal after all. They were merely strangers who had only met each other twice. But it was still Gu Ning's destiny to meet the man again. Gu Ning went to her room and called Gu Man to tell her mother she was safe. In case Gu Man would ask to talk with Mu Ku or Yu Mixi, Gu Ning hung up after a short time. She used an excuse that she needed to review some documents. Gu Ning indeed was going to read documents. She hadn't read the books about emeralds and jade yet. She wanted to make full use of her time and read those books now. But before that, Gu Ning used her WeChat, sending out a message to the Family of Fighters group to tell her friends that she had safely arrived. There were thousands of chat messages above, which shocked Gu Ning. These people were so talkative. Gu Ning read those messages. Some asked whether she had arrived at City G, while some were curious why she was in City G. One said she was here to visit relatives, while one said she was here to meet a friend or a blind date. Gu Ning felt like laughing. Gu Ning, I'm in my hotel now, safe and sound. Hao Ran, wow, boss is here. Chu Pei Han, boss, don't forget our gifts. Gift emoji. Mu Ku, don't forget our gifts. Gift emoji. Qin Zixuan, don't forget our gifts. Gift emoji. Zhang Tianping, don't forget our gifts. Gift emoji. Yu Mixi, don't forget our gifts. Gift emoji. Gu Ning laughed out loud. These people were so adorable. She hadn't decided what she would bring back to them as gifts yet. Gu Ning, I won't forget. It's late now. I need to go to bed. Tomorrow is a busy day. Chu Pei Han, fine, I'm more and more curious about what you're up to now. Hao Ran, exactly, boss, are you going to live in the lap of luxury without us? Mu Ku, nonsense, Hao Ran, you're already living in the lap of luxury. Kick out emoji. Qin Zixuan and Zhang Tianping, agree. Kick out emoji. Hao Ran, you all bully me. Cry emoji. Hao Ran, boss, I need your care. Pitiful face emoji. Gu Ning, get out. Kick out emoji. Everyone, LOL. Laughing out loud emoji. Hao Ran, you people. I'm going to die. Spurting blood emoji. Gu Ning, alright, I'm going to make a big deal, and I'll tell you one day. Good night. Yu Mixi, good night, Ning Ning. Everyone, good night, boss. After the talk, Gu Ning started to read. Stone gambling was also called object gambling. It meant that when the jade was mined, there was a layer of weathered leather one wrapped around it. It was impossible to know the quality of it. It must be cut to know the quality of the jade. The original stones of jade were divided into two types, namely mountain material and seed material. As the name implied, the mountain material referred to the material from mountains. It had no outer skin and was a jade itself. However, most of the jade was poor in quality. The seed material was the raw material of stone gambling that people often referred to. The seed material was formed in the riverbed. The surface of the seed material was weathered, so the outer shell was formed. Thus the inner condition couldn't be seen. One could only rely on his experience to judge whether the inner part had formed an emerald. Those seeds were called raw materials or raw stones. The most profitable, most tempting, but also the most risky bet would be stone gambling. There was a saying in the jewelry industry, stone gambling was like life gambling. The winner could earn 10 times or hundreds times more money and became a millionaire overnight, while the loser could lose everything. Compared with stone gambling, stocks, real estate and other risky trades all seemed mild and gentle. The buying and selling of the original stones of jade was the most mysterious trade in the jewelry industry. Its mystery lay in the word gambling. Therefore, the buyers always called it jade gambling or stone gambling. Generally, one couldn't tell what was in a stone from its appearance. Even with the technological advances today, there was no instrument which could quickly determine whether a stone was valuable or valueless through its shell. Therefore, the risk of buying and selling stones was very high, and it was also very exciting. Thus it was called gambling and was quite profitable if one won. Accordingly, this business had been going on since ancient times. The jade used to gamble was also divided into different classes, mainly depending on the type, color and transparency. Again, the quality of the jade mainly relied on 3 points: type, color and transparency. The type referred to the variety of jade. Jade from a good type was hard. The types from high to low levels were old pit glass, ice, hail, bean, oil green, hibiscus, gold, and so on. The type of the jade was of great importance. Color referred to the colors of jade. There were many colors of jade, but the best jade was mainly bright green. The colors from high to low levels were green, king's green, bright green, apple green, red, yellow, and purple. The production of jade in special color was relatively small. The color of jade must be combined with great transparency, and it must be less cracked in order to be priceless. Transparency was the ability of the jade to let the visible light pass through. The jade with a higher transparency was more valuable. The best jade was like glass, and was called glass bottom in the jade industry. After understanding the stone gambling, Gu Ning turned to the computer to learn about the domestic jewelry brand's history, development, fame, reputation, founders, and its chairman. Regardless of whether it was the first, second or third, or not on the line, Gu Ning has read it all over. But the time was limited, so Gu Ning didn't check the foreign brands now. Besides, Gu Ning hadn't developed so fast. She wanted to be influential, but she also knew to take it slowly. The next day, Gu Ning got up at 7 a.m. She called for breakfast first, then brushed her teeth and washed her face. 30 minutes later, her breakfast arrived. Gu Ning wasn't in a hurry, because it was too early so the stores weren't open yet. All west ch.rs on n.o/vli/n/.cm. At 8:30, Gu Ning called the reception and ordered a tailored car. The hotel was efficient. When Gu Ning went down to the first floor, her tailored car was waiting for her. Antiques and stone gambling were always together. So Gu Ning told the driver to take her to the antique market. It wasn't far from downtown to the antique market. She would arrive there after 40 minutes if there was no traffic jam. On her way, Gu Ning took out her phone. Her friends were talking in the Family of Fighters group again. But Gu Ning didn't get involved in their talk. She took a glance, then put her phone away. When she arrived at the antique market, it was slightly past 9. The antique market was already active. Gu Ning knew she would spend a lot of time in the antique market. She would not make the driver wait for her for so long. So she told the driver to leave first, and she would call him when she needed to go back. The minute Gu Ning walked into the antique market, she became excited and nervous. The antique market in City G was much bigger than the one in City F. The objects were also in a larger number. The power of Gu Ning's jade eyes was thin now, so she decided to take a look at stones first. She wanted to absorb the power. Antiques and stone gambling were set separately on the two sides of the street. Following the sign, Gu Ning walked towards the street of stone gambling. The nearer Gu Ning was to the street of stone gambling, the more excited she got, just like there was a large amount of thick power and money waiting for her ahead. The market of stone gambling in City G wasn't very big. There were only around 10 shops, but people were everywhere. Gu Ning walked into the first shop. It wasn't big and was around 40 square meters. There were piles of large and small stones on the ground and the platform. Those were raw materials of stones. These raw materials had already been selected by the boss and were stacked in equal order. All marked with a price. On the ground were raw materials of a low level, while on the shelves were raw materials of a high level. Raw materials could be sold by number or weight. The price of a raw material didn't rely on its size. From a professional point of view, if the skin was good and the green rate was high, it would be marked as a higher level and was more expensive. Of course, the higher level didn't equal to a high green rate. After all, it was extremely difficult to choose the right raw material with jade in it. No one knew whether there was an emerald in a raw material. Therefore, even if it was a raw material of a low level, it was possible there was an emerald in it. It all depended on one's luck. There were many people in the store, and no one came to welcome Gu Ning. Gu Ning liked that though. She wasn't willing to shop with a salesman who kept talking beside her ears. Gu Ning immediately used her jade eyes to scan over those raw materials. She checked those on the shelves first. They were supposed to be in the high level with high green rate. However, disappointedly, they were mostly white stones. Although there were some jade in them, the jade wasn't of good quality. It wasn't worth much even if you cut it out. Gu Ning didn't want to waste her time on it. Then, Gu Ning turned to the raw materials on the ground. They were all white stones again. It seemed a pair of jade eyes wasn't enough. Gu Ning also needed good luck. She stepped out of this shop with disappointment, then entered another one. The result was the same. The raw materials were either white stones, or with bad jade in them. The power in Gu Ning's jade eyes was thin, so she felt tired after a short time. She prayed in her heart, hoping to find jade soon. Otherwise her power would be completely consumed soon. Without the power, she couldn't use her telepathic eyes. It seemed the god had heard Gu Ning's prayer. When Gu Ning was about to close her jade eyes, she found 2 raw materials with green jade in them among a pile of raw materials. One was almost as big as a football, while the other was merely bigger than an apple. Both of them were of good quality. Gu Ning felt excited, but remained calm. She walked like an ordinary customer to the pile of raw materials. With a cart, Gu Ning picked up those 2 raw materials with green jade in them. To avoid special attention, Gu Ning also picked up another 3 raw materials in different size. They were all smaller than a football. "Hey, how much are these in total?" Gu Ning pushed the cart to the counter. The boss was a little surprised to see Gu Ning, who was a teenage girl, but since she was a customer, the boss treated her kindly. There were marks on the raw materials, so the boss didn't need to ask where Gu Ning had picked those raw materials up. Those raw materials were all of a low level and weren't expensive. 200 yuan a pound. Those 5 raw materials that Gu Ning had picked up weren't big. They added up to 40 pounds and cost 8,000 yuan. 8,000 weren't much as long as there were emeralds in those raw materials. If they were all stones, 8,000 would be too much. Gu Ning paid her bill. The boss asked, "Miss, do you want to cut them out now?" "Yes, please," Gu Ning replied. Gu Ning was here for money. She definitely wanted to cut the raw materials on site and sell to the emeralds right away. "Lao Zhang, come and cut the stones out," the boss called someone inside the room. "I'm coming." A man, who was around 50 years old, walked out from the room. He came to the counter, seeing Gu Ning. He was surprised that the customer was a young teenager. Lao Zhang asked with uncertainty, "Miss, it's you who wants to cut the stones out, right?" "Yes," Gu Ning answered. "Please follow me." Lao Zhang then guided Gu Ning towards the area where they cut stones. Meanwhile, those customers in the shop all stood around them to have a look. Although there was a faint, almost zero, possibility to get jade out, it was the exciting point of stone gambling. Even if it was impossible to get jade out, the gambler would stay hopeful. Everyone who enjoyed stone gambling shared the same feelings. And the crowd was surprised the owner of those raw materials was a young girl. Most customers here were middle-aged men or the elderly. There were few young people, especially young girls around. Gu Ning handed the worker a waste material first. The worker asked her, "Miss, how would you like to cut it? Rub or cut?" "Cut, please," Gu Ning said. "Cut it directly, or draw lines first?" the worker asked again. Although he could tell this one must be a waste material, he needed to follow the customer's order. "Cut it directly, please." It was a waste material. Gu Ning didn't care at all. Cutting a stone directly didn't mean to cut it randomly. The worker still needed to have a good judgment. The machine started to work. After one cut, it was nothing but a white stone. After another cut, there was still nothing in it. After the third cut, the stone had already been cut half out. Nothing in it. It was waste. LL news to rise at N0V/LBI/.cm. The crowd felt disappointed after the result. But if there really was jade in it, the crowd would be envious. That was human nature. Gu Ning calmly picked up another waste material. It also proved to be a pure stone. The crowd began to feel bored. Some walked away. The third time, Gu Ning chose a big raw material with jade in it. "Let me draw lines first," Gu Ning said, then drew some lines on it. She didn't draw the lines accurately, but basically the same. The machine started to work again. After one cut, the out layer was removed. There was a light green color open to the air. All of a sudden, Gu Ning sensed a kind of strong power. She was excited, and couldn't wait to absorb it. The power was absorbed into her eyes. She felt cool and comfortable. Her sight became better and she was energetic now. At the same time, the worker raised his voice in excitement, "The jade. There is jade in it." His voice immediately attracted everyone's attention in the shop. The people in front of them were all surprised and wide-eyed. It was so incredible. Those who had just left immediately turned back, and some who just entered the store all came up. "What? There is jade in it?" "Yes, there is jade in it." The onlookers seemed more excited than Gu Ning, who was the owner, because stone gambling was a high-risk business, and the green rate was always low. Most of the onlookers knew Gu Ning was the owner. They all looked to Gu Ning with envy, but Gu Ning stayed calm as usual. The crowd all wondered whether this teenage girl understood stone gambling, or if she simply didn't care at all. "Young lady, would you sell this raw material to me for 50,000 yuan? Although there is a little light green color showing out, who knows if there is more inside, right? If there is no more inside, then it'll be waste. If you sell it now, you can earn 50,000 yuan anyway. If you don't sell it, you'll have nothing," a middle-aged man in a suit, who was a little fat and about 50 years old said. If the raw material which was cut open had green in it, the cut was called a window. If the owner didn't want to gamble any further, he or she could sell it. The buyer was also gambling, of course, because a light layer of green didn't mean the raw material would be valuable. There was often only one thin layer of green in many raw materials, or the jade inside was very small. But a raw material with a window was much more expensive than a raw material without a window, like the one Gu Ning had bought for 2,000 yuan and the man later bid 50,000 yuan for it. The raw material showed green after all. It was possible that there was jade in it. If the green layer was thin, it would be waste. If there was jade in it, it would be worth a certain amount of money according to the size of the jade. The middle-aged man was simply trying to deceive Gu Ning. In his eyes, Gu Ning was merely a teenager and must know nothing about stone gambling. Even if there wasn't jade in the raw material, he could afford 50,000 yuan. But if there was jade inside, he could make a lot of money. Although Gu Ning didn't know much about stone gambling, she knew the jade in the stone must be extremely valuable. 50,000 yuan couldn't buy 1% of it. "I'll stay and gamble till the jade is all out. The most generous buyer will get it," Gu Ning said. The man was disappointed, but he couldn't do anything about it. The worker continued to cut. After the second cut, there was another layer of green shown, and the type of the jade was revealed. "It's valuable," the worker said in excitement. "The color is a little yellow. The quality is good. This is of the glutinous rice type." The boss came over, and was also thrilled. "Young lady, could you sell it to me in 500,000 yuan? The middle-aged man bid again. "I'll pay 800,000 yuan for it." 1 million yuan. 2 million yuan. When the price rose up to 2 million yuan, no one else bid again. The jade hadn't been fully cut out. It was still uncertain how big it was and how much it was worth. Gu Ning didn't stop them from bidding. After they finished, Gu Ning opened her mouth. I will sell it when the jade is fully cut out. The jade must be worth more than 2 million yuan. The worker then went on to cut the stone. He removed the out layer first, then started to rub it. Half an hour later, a jade which was as big as half a football was finally cut out. The glutinous rice type was jade of a high level. It was absolutely worth a lot. Moreover, its size wasn't small. 5 million yuan. 6 million yuan. 7 million yuan. 10 million yuan, a bright voice sounded. The bidder directly omitted the 3 million gap. An energetic old man of 70 years old walked inside. Oh, Master Fu, it's been a while. Nice to meet you again, a man immediately greeted. At the beginning of the month, my great-grandson was born. I've stayed at home for a long time, but it was uncomfortable to stay at home for too long. Thus I wanted to take a look around. Unexpectedly, I arrived on time when the top-grade jade was cut out. I wanted to buy it and make a gift for my great-grandson. Master Fu said. Master Fu was mainly engaged in real estate business and many other industries. He was a very rich businessman with 8 billion yuan of wealth. His family was one of the third-tier richest families in a second-tier city like G City. Although the super-rich families could be divided into the first-tier, second-tier and third-tier, there were only 10 of them in all. Because only the top 10 richest people were able to be called the super-rich. And Master Fu was in the top 7 on the list. Of course, in addition to those super-rich people on the list, there were also many invisible super-rich families. It seems Master Fu is very interested in the jade of glutinous rice type, but I like it too. I'm afraid I have to compete with you, Master Fu, another man said. 11 million yuan. Although the man wasn't as wealthy as Master Fu, he bid a very high price for the jade. The most generous buyer will get the jade. Then, let's compete for it. 15 million yuan. Master Fu directly raised his bid by 4 million. 16 million yuan. 17 million yuan. 18 million yuan. Explore new ovals on envelbuy.com. 30 million yuan. The bid now was 30 million yuan. Master Fu had made it. 30 million yuan was almost the highest price of the jade. The buyer wouldn't lose money, but couldn't earn much either. The boss of the shop had mixed emotions. He was excited and regretful at the same time. Why? He was excited because someone had cut out jade from a raw material in his shop. That was great advertisement. His shop would be popular then. Meanwhile, he was regretful that he himself didn't know the raw material was worth a fortune. If he had known the raw material was so valuable, he would have cut it out himself. But the boss still understood that was how the industry of stone gambling worked. He was mentally prepared. Besides, it had happened before, so he soon accepted the reality. The man didn't expect Master Fu would bid such a high price for the jade. He had to give up at the end. Master Fu, you win. He didn't want to pay 30 million yuan for the jade. He was a businessman after all. He wanted to benefit from the deal, instead of losing money. Haha, Xiao Zhao, don't worry. Perhaps there is something better waiting for you. Master Fu comforted the man. Unexpectedly, what Master Fu had said became the truth later. Yes, the next jade in a smaller size was worth more than the previous one. Thank you, Master Fu. The man smiled with sadness. He knew it wasn't easy to get an emerald of top quality. Who is the owner of this jade? Master Fu asked. Gu Ning knew this jade of the glutinous rice type was a high-level jade. Even though it was far less valuable than the king's green, it was still very valuable. Gu Ning estimated it was worth about 30 million yuan, but when she really heard the bid of 30 million yuan, she was still shocked. She couldn't believe it was real. Gu Ning didn't get her mind back until Master Fu asked the question. She immediately replied calmly, "Nice to meet you, Master Fu. This jade is mine." Seeing it was a young girl, Master Fu was also surprised, especially since the price rose up to 30 million yuan. Gu Ning could remain so calm. She was able to stay as calm as always at such a young age. Master Fu had a good impression of Gu Ning. "Good girl," Master Fu complimented. "Do you want a check or transfer?" "Transfer please," Gu Ning said. She took out her bank card and told Master Fu her account. "Sure," Master Fu answered. He called someone to transfer the money right away. Explore new ovals on envelby.com. After a few minutes, Gu Ning received a message which showed the 30 million yuan had been successfully transferred. Then, Gu Ning handed the jade to Master Fu. "Miss, do you want to cut the rest?" the worker inquired. "Yes, please," Gu Ning answered. She gave a waste material to the worker. Master Fu was about to leave with the jade, but he stayed when Gu Ning continued to cut her raw materials. Since Gu Ning had already cut out a high-level emerald, the crowd was excited to see what would happen next. Although they all believed Gu Ning couldn't be so lucky as to cut out another jade, they were still full of hope. Unfortunately, the next one was a waste material. However, the crowd didn't disperse yet, because Gu Ning had one last raw material. Gu Ning hadn't successfully gotten an emerald until the third raw material of hers had been cut out. It could be possible that the last raw material had jade in it too. Still, there wasn't a strong possibility. The last one wasn't big. Gu Ning also knew the outlayer wasn't thick, so she said, "Please rub this one." "No problem," the worker replied. It took a while longer to rub a stone than cut it, but everyone was patient. After a while, green showed on the stone. The worker raised his voice in excitement. "Firstly, there is an emerald, again. Gee, the girl is so lucky. 2 and 5 have jade inside." This time, the boss felt greatly regretful. There was only a little green that showed. It was hard to tell the type. The worker went on to rub the stone. The more the outer layer was removed, the more excited everyone got. When most of the outer layer had been removed, the type of the jade was clear enough. Jesus! Isn't it of the high ice type? High ice types were only a little worse than glass type, but they were also a type of high-level jade. It was even better than the glutinous rice type. This emerald was crystal clear with great transparency. It belonged to the old pit, high ice type. Although it wasn't big, and only as big as 1/3 of the previous jade of glutinous rice type, its price wasn't much lower than the previous one. Gu Ning immediately absorbed the power into her jade eyes. As long as her telepathic eye space was full of the power, it would grow bigger. When the jade was fully cut out, a man bid at once, 20 million yuan. It was Master Fu's voice again. No one dared to follow up this time, because there were few rich people around. The man who had competed with Master Fu last time now was about to cry. He said, "Master Fu, didn't you say there is something better waiting for me? Why do you have to compete with me again this time? I'll pay 25 million yuan for it." This jade of the high ice type was more valuable than the last one of glutinous rice type indeed, but it wasn't big. It was worth around 25 million yuan. If it was made into jewelry, the buyer could earn about 10 million yuan from it. But if the bid went higher, it wouldn't be very profitable. Master Fu, instead, was determined to buy the jade. The most generous buyer will have the jade. "I think it's pretty fair." The man didn't know what to do. If Master Fu bid again, he had to give up once more. "Fine, this one is yours." Master Fu understood the man, whose name was Zhao Yifeng, wanted the jade so badly. They were acquaintances actually. Master Fu didn't want to lose a friend just because of an emerald. Zhao Yifeng was thrilled at once. "Thank you so much, Master Fu." Thus, Zhao Yifeng got this jade of high ice type at the price of 25 million yuan in the end. Within a day, Gu Ning made 55 million yuan. Although Gu Ning seemed calm from her appearance, her heart was pumping faster and faster. She would scream out if allowed now. "Miss Gu, it's so nice to meet you. I am the chairman of Furong Jewelry, called Zhao Yifeng. This is my business card. If Miss Gu cuts out any other high-level jade again, please let me know. I can buy it at a reasonable price, and please give me priority as a buyer." Zhao Yifeng was now fully convinced by Gu Ning. Whether it was because of luck or real strength, it was truly rare to cut out 2 high-level emeralds from 5 raw materials. Gu Ning had checked up on the domestic jewelry brands, their founders and chairman online last night, so she naturally knew about the Furong Jewelry brand. The headquarters of Furong Jewelry wasn't in City G, but it had many stores across the country with 2 billion yuan in assets. It belonged to the domestic third-line brand, and the chairman was Zhao Yifeng, who was about 40 years old. Zhao Yifeng didn't need to buy in jade himself. He was just here for fun when he was inspecting his stores in City G. Gu Ning was excited that Zhao Yifeng made friends with her on his own initiative. Therefore, if she was going to cut out more jade, she would sell some to Zhao Yifeng. They would be peers. Although peers always competed with each other, they could also cooperate. Gu Ning accepted his name card with happiness. Sure, I'll call Mr. Zhao first if I cut out any high-level jade in the future. Young girl, please don't forget me. You can contact me too. I won't pay less than Zhao Yifeng. Master Fu took out his name card immediately, putting it straight into Gu Ning's hand. Gu Ning thought it was so funny to see those two buyers competing. Although Gu Ning didn't know Master Fu's background now, she knew the old man must be wealthy and powerful. Gu Ning didn't aim at the old man's wealth, of course. She just wanted to maintain a good relationship with her clients, especially super rich clients. Master Fu, you do this on purpose, right? Zhao Yifeng felt a little displeased. So what? You're not the only one who loves jade. I love it too. Master Fu argued back like a child. Young girl, do remember me, he kindly reminded Gu Ning then. I will. Gu Ning smiled. She was going to cut out many more emeralds in the future. It wouldn't hurt anyone if she sold some to Master Fu as well. Master Fu was happy to hear an affirmative answer. After that, Gu Ning left the shop first. Before long, many people had heard the news that the shop had cut out 2 high-level jade. People all came to the shop for good luck. The shop became popular at once. Unfortunately, they weren't as lucky as Gu Ning. Gu Ning left the shop, then walked in another one. She luckily found another high-level jade and a medium-level jade. The high-level jade was as big as an apple, while the medium-level jade was a little bigger and the size of half a football. Gu Ning did not plan to cut the high-level jade out now. She had just cut out 2 high-level emeralds and didn't want to cause a sensation. Thus she decided to cut out the medium-level one. The medium-level jade was sold out at the price of 8 million yuan. Gu Ning continued to visit those shops. After 6 stores, she had collected another 7 or 8 high-level jade in different sizes. Their value varied, of course. The biggest one was as big as a football, while the smallest one was as small as an apple. Other than those high-level jade, she also accumulated 5 medium-level jade. As for the low-level jade, Gu Ning ignored them directly. On her way, Gu Ning cut out 2 medium-level jade and earned 23 million yuan. And the rest, Gu Ning didn't want to cut them out now. She had no intention to be famous. Till now, Gu Ning had made 86 million yuan in total by cutting out jade. The price of those raw materials varied from high to low levels. The expensive one cost dozens of thousands of yuan a pound, while the cheap one cost merely hundreds of yuan a pound. Thus Gu Ning had spent 3 million yuan on her raw materials in all. But if she cut out all her raw materials, she could earn 600 to 700 million yuan. Gu Ning decided to collect more raw materials with jade in them before she sold some to Master Fu and Zhao Yifeng. Every time Gu Ning bought a raw material, she would secretly put it into the telepathic eye space, so that she was able to carry a light backpack along the way. Gu Ning stepped in a shop again. This shop was much bigger than those she had visited. There were a lot more customers as well as raw materials in it too. Hearing the talks among others, Gu Ning then found out the shop just had a new group of high-level raw materials in. Those high-level raw materials were more likely to have jade in them. Of course, even though the green rate was higher, one needed to rely on his or her luck. Gu Ning immediately used her jade eyes to scan over those raw materials. There were indeed emeralds in them, one was even red. There were 2 raw materials with jade in them. One was a little smaller than a football, while the other was as big as 2 apples. The raw material with a red jade inside was as big as half a football. The minute Gu Ning found out there was a red jade in it, she liked it. Thus she pulled the cart ahead to it at once. However, when Gu Ning moved near to it, a woman around 30 years old in a fashionable suit picked it up before her. Gu Ning felt nervous. She knew the rules. You couldn't grab the raw material from others. You could only take it if others abandoned it. Gu Ning didn't want to lose the other 2 raw materials with green jade inside as well, so she picked them up without further delay. Meanwhile, she fixed her eyes on the raw material with a red jade inside. As long as the woman put it down, she would pick it up. I don't think there is jade in this one. It looks ugly, a young man, who was standing beside the woman, said. Nonsense. You can never judge from its appearance. Just because it looks ugly doesn't mean there isn't jade in it, the woman retorted. Hearing that, Gu Ning's heart skipped a heartbeat. The woman must like this raw material too. Then the woman added, but, I need to consider whether to buy it. After that, the woman put the raw material down, secretly remembering its number. She liked this raw material, but hadn't made up her mind to buy it yet. The second the woman left, Gu Ning picked the raw material up. She was greatly relieved. Fortunately, the woman hadn't decided to buy it yet, or Gu Ning would have to miss this rare jade. It must be priceless. Gu Ning continued to scan the raw materials with her jade eyes. She got another two with jade inside. Both were as big as 2/3 of a football. Those emeralds weren't enough, but Gu Ning decided to pay her bill putting them into the telepathic eye space first. It wouldn't be convenient if she carried lots of raw materials with her. The raw materials were the latest group, so they were expensive. The small ones cost 10,000 yuan a pound, while the big ones cost 20,000 yuan a pound. Gu Ning bought 5 raw materials, which weighed 93 pounds. They cost 1.5 million yuan in all. Gu Ning put those raw materials into the telepathic eye space, then went back to shopping. Before long, Gu Ning found another one with a green jade inside. This time, the jade was much bigger. It was as big as 2 footballs. Gu Ning immediately moved it to her cart. It weighed at least 50 pounds, and it cost 20,000 yuan a pound. That was to say, this raw material cost around 1 million yuan. Of course, Gu Ning wouldn't care its cost at all. As long as there was jade in it, she would buy it even if it cost 10 million. The jade inside was worth far more than 10 million. Gu Ning could figure out the types of the raw materials from its power. The thicker the power was, the more valuable the jade was. However, Gu Ning still didn't know the exact price of the jade. The price depended on the buyer. Ariad updated stirise at n/vel/bin.com. Gu Ning? Right when Gu Ning put the raw material into her cart, she heard someone call her name. The voice sounded familiar, so she knew who he was before she saw the person. Gu Ning looked over. It was Qin Yifan, who seemed surprised. She smiled kindly. Nice to meet you. What a coincidence! Are you here to buy some raw materials too? Qin Yifan was accompanied by Li Jinjin and a young man who was around 27 years old. Li Jinjin became upset when she saw Gu Ning here. She hated Gu Ning and didn't want to meet her again. On the other side, Gu Ning didn't care at all. Yes. One of my old friends runs this shop. There is a new group of high-level raw materials, and I've been informed to have a look. Actually, I came to City G to check the raw materials here, but I didn't expect you're here for the same reason, Qin Yifan said. He looked delighted. No one knew whether he was so happy because he had met Gu Ning, or because he had met an acquaintance. I'm interested in stone gambling too, but I'm a newcomer. I don't know much about it, Gu Ning said. You can ask me if you have any questions, Qin Yifan said with kindness. Sure. Gu Ning didn't reject, but it was another thing whether she would really turn to him for help. Li Jinjin couldn't stand that Qin Yifan was so kind to Gu Ning. She immediately walked over. There is a weathered leather shell on the surface of the raw materials, which makes people unable to see the jade inside. Thus many people think that the stone gambling completely relies on luck, which is actually a wrong idea. The raw materials possess many characteristics. We can judge the internal condition of a raw material according to these characteristics. From the perspective of petrology, the jade inside has a certain correlation with the color of the outer shell. The characteristics of songhua, python stripe and moss. 1. Songhua, python stripe and moss refer to surface features of crust, distribution of color and characteristics of fissure skeins of raw jade, are important features for distinguishing the internal conditions of jadeite, Li Jinjin explained very professionally, like she was teaching Gu Ning. However, the disdain and arrogance in her eyes betrayed her. Li Jinjin was merely showing off her knowledge and humiliating Gu Ning because she knew very little about stone gambling. While Li Jinjin was explaining, she checked the raw material in Gu Ning's cart with her eyes. She then said with dislike, there is no python stripe, songhua or moss around this raw material. I'm afraid this one is a waste material, Ms. Gu. Li Jinjin's professional explanation received much acclaim from the people around her. This young lady is so knowledgeable at such a young age. True. There aren't many young people who know a lot about the raw materials of stone gambling. Hearing the praise, Li Jinjin felt more proud, like she had greatly defeated Gu Ning. Li Jinjin's family was involved in the jewelry business too. She had grown up with a variety of jade and had good acquaintance with the raw materials of stone gambling. In the past, she had cut out several medium-level jade. Although she had bought more waste materials, she had earned some money in all. The jewelry brand of the Li family wasn't in the third-line jewelry brands but was famous in City G. The Li family had a wealth of 500 million yuan, which was a real super-rich family, but compared with the third-tier richest families, it was left far behind. Moreover, their company's assets not only belonged to the Li family, but also belonged to the shareholders. Li Jinjin's explanation was correct and true, so Qin Yifan wasn't aware she was being unkind. Miss Li is right, but a raw material without songhua, python stripe and moss doesn't mean there isn't jade in it. I like this one, and I would like to give it a try, Gu Ning replied airily. Gu Ning admitted that Li Jinjin was professional, but no matter how professional she wasn't able to determine which raw material had jade inside. Li Jinjin's professional knowledge couldn't be more accurate than her jade eyes. Gu Ning knew there must be an emerald in this raw material because of her jade eyes, while Li Jinjin was certain this was a waste material. It was obvious who was right. Gu Ning only cared about who would be the winner. To win was the most important thing. Li Jinjin sneered, but pretended to compliment Gu Ning. Miss Gu is so determined. Even though Qin Yifan didn't think highly of that raw material in Gu Ning's card either, he didn't know how to stop the argument since Gu Ning seemed so sure. Yifan, brother, let's check the raw materials. Li Jinjin urged. She didn't want to stay with Gu Ning. Gu Ning, why don't you join us? Qin Yifan kindly invited. Yifan, Li Jinjin wanted to stop him. But before Li Jinjin could say another word, Gu Ning refused first. Thanks, but I don't think there is a need for that, since the shop isn't big. Well, fine. If you need any help, please let me know. Qin Yifan didn't insist. The shop wasn't big. It wasn't difficult to meet again. Gu Ning nodded, then pulled her card away. Right at that moment, the woman who had picked up the raw material with a red jade inside came back. Apparently, she decided to buy the raw material. But unfortunately, the raw material was Gu Ning's now. The woman was disappointed and regretful. She had lost the raw material that she liked. Gu Ning ignored her and kept on shopping. Before long, 2 raw materials with jade inside came into Gu Ning's sight. One was as big as a football, while the other was as big as 1/3 of a football. The second one was in the hand of a man, who was around 40 years old. Gu Ning obviously couldn't go and grab it. Gu Ning picked up the other one. She stopped looking at the one in the man's hand. She wasn't that selfish to have all the raw materials with jade inside. The reason why she had stared at the raw material with a red jade inside was that red jade was rare. She didn't want to miss it. Since it hadn't been cut out yet, Gu Ning had no idea whether it was high level or medium level. Gu Ning turned to another pile of raw materials and got another 2 with green jade inside. Although they were only as small as an apple, the color was special. Follow stories at n/velb/in.com. After a while, she got another one which was as big as 2 footballs. Gu Ning planned to cut out 2 or 3 raw materials here. She also picked up 2 big waste materials as a disguise. Gu Ning was easily noticed for she was a young girl. Besides, she picked up raw materials so carelessly, which also attracted a lot of attention from people around her. Gu Ning knew people were staring at her, but she didn't care. The raw materials Gu Ning had chosen weren't small, nor cheap. They cost 4.5 million yuan in total. After paying her bill, Gu Ning noticed the man was still checking the raw material in his hand. She had an impulse to tell the man to buy it now. But she also knew the man possibly wouldn't believe her. She wasn't an experienced expert after all. Gee. Isn't this the boss of Zhoufu Jewelry, Zhou Jinghong? Oh, the ex-boss, because I am the boss of Zhoufu Jewelry now. What? Do you still have money to play stone gambling after you've lost everything? A bright, but sarcastic male voice sounded. Everyone, Gu Ning included, looked over at once. Zhoufu Jewelry had 16 years of history with hundreds of millions in assets. It was a relatively low-level brand. The previous chairman was Zhou Xinghong, and Xiaoping became its chairman half a year ago. The reason was still a secret. Xiaoping was in a suit with a briefcase in hand. He was a little fat, walking with his head up and chest out. He was followed by several men, and looked like a powerful man. But Xiaoping squinted his eyes with viciousness. Hearing that voice, Zhou Xinghong, the man who was holding the raw material in hand, quickly raised his head. Xiaoping, Zhou Xinghong clenched his teeth. His eyes were full of hatred. Facing Zhou Xinghong's hatred, Xiaoping didn't care at all. He continued to mock, "I heard that you want to restart your business, but I think you can stop and save the money for your son's tuition fee." Zhou Xinghong didn't want to argue with Xiaoping in public. Besides, he had no chance to win. Thus Zhou Xinghong swallowed down his anger, saying coldly, "It's none of your business. Xiaoping, take care of yourself in case something bad happens to you out of the blue." "I'm not afraid at all. Who cares what a loser says?" "Zhou Xinghong, do you have enough money to buy one piece? If you don't have, I can lend you some." Xiaoping humiliated Zhou Xinghong. "Who says who can't afford? Uncle Zhou, let's go to the counter." Gu Ning walked over, pulling Zhou Xinghong away before he could struggle. Zhou Xinghong was very surprised. He didn't expect the young girl would be that strong. He understood this young girl was helping him, but he did not have money to buy the raw material. Xiaoping didn't know Zhou Xinghong was with a young girl. He was a little upset, but also wanted to know what Zhou Xinghong could get. "Young girl, I'm not buying," Zhou Xinghong said awkwardly. "Mr. Zhou, I know you're still optimistic about this raw material, but you have concerns. In fact, I'm also optimistic about this raw material. If you are not willing to take full risks, we each can pay half of this raw material. If it's valuable, we can share the profit. If it's not, you won't lose much money either." Gu Ning knew Zhou Xinghong liked this raw material too, but because he lacked money, he hesitated. If Zhou Xinghong planned to buy this raw material, Gu Ning wouldn't compete with him. She could wait till he dropped it. But Gu Ning had her own plan. She approached Zhou Xinghong for a reason. Well, Zhou Xinghong changed his mind. He did not dare to take the risk, but also liked this raw material. Thus he hesitated. If someone was willing to share the cost with him, he would like to try. But it was a young girl. Zhou Xinghong believed she didn't need to take the risk. He didn't want to take advantage of a young girl. "Young girl, if it's a waste material, you will lose money too," Zhou Xinghong said. "I know, but if it's valuable, I'll win money. Besides, that's gambling," Gu Ning replied. Zhou Xinghong hesitated for a while longer, then agreed at the end. This raw material weighed around 6 pounds. It cost 10,000 yuan a pound and around 60,000 yuan in total. The buyer of the raw materials needed to register and sign. Since they bought it together, they needed to sign both of their names. After signing and paying, Gu Ning let Zhou Xinghong take the raw material to cut it out together. On their way, Gu Ning pushed her cart with her. Zhou Xinghong was astonished. Did you buy all of these?" "Yes," Gu Ning answered. Zhou Xinghong swallowed with great force. This young girl must be from a rich family. Since she was a rich kid, Zhou Xinghong was relieved. And they had already paid the bill. Xiaoping stood afar looking at Zhou Xinghong. So he had no idea Zhou Xinghong and Gu Ning bought the raw material together. Besides, Gu Ning was merely a teenager. Xiaoping didn't believe Gu Ning bought it, so he believed Zhou Xinghong must be the only buyer. He knew although Zhou Xinghong went bankrupt, he wasn't that poor and could afford a raw material. But when Xiaoping noticed the cart full of raw materials pushed by Gu Ning, he was shocked. How could Zhou Xinghong afford those raw materials? They cost at least millions. Xiaoping immediately walked over. "Gee. Zhou Xinghong, how can you afford these raw materials?" Zhou Xinghong didn't want to talk with Xiaoping, but he didn't want to cause a misunderstanding either. So he explained, "These aren't mine." Hearing that, Xiaoping was relieved, then he mocked, "Indeed, I forget you're too poor to afford that many raw materials now. But if these raw materials weren't Zhou Xinghong's, then it must be the young girl's. Who can afford all of these raw materials at one time? This young girl must be from a rich family." Xiaoping thought. What's her relationship with Zhou Xinghong? No matter what the relationship between them was, Xiaoping felt jealousy already. He was worried that someone would help Zhou Xinghong to restart his business, which would be a threat to him. He had done a lot to defeat Zhou Xinghong. Zhou Xinghong just gave him a cold glance, then walked straight to where the stones were cut out. Let's see what you can get. Xiaoping followed up. As long as there was someone to cut the raw materials, people in the shop would gather around to have a look. Although there were several machines, Gu Ning wasn't in a hurry to cut hers out. After drawing the lines, the worker started to cut. After a cut, a light green showed. The worker raised his voice in excitement, a green jade. The crowd was excited at once. The most excited one was Zhou Xinghong. A green jade! There was a green jade in it. Xiaoping, at the same time, felt upset, with his eyes full of viciousness. He had schemed so hard to make Zhou Xinghong go bankrupt. Was he going to fail? No. Follow stories at n/VELB/in.com. Before long, an emerald the size of a man's palm was fully cut out. Its color was light and pure. It was of the hibiscus type. Hibiscus type was the type ranked between glutinous rice type and ice type. It belonged to the upper quality types, and was very valuable. Feeling the strong power, Gu Ning naturally absorbed it in. The jade was out. People began to bid. 5 million yuan. 6 million yuan. 18 million yuan. At last, the jade of the hibiscus type was bid to a high price of 18 million yuan. It was sold at the price of 18 million yuan at the end. No one was more thrilled than Zhou Xinghong. He finally had money. Miss Gu. Zhou Xinghong walked to Gu Ning, wanting to talk about the money. You can keep all the money in your card for now, Gu Ning said. Hearing that, Zhou Xinghong was struck dumb. Aren't you afraid I would take all the money and disappear? I trust you, Gu Ning said with determination. She didn't really trust Zhou Xinghong, but wanted to give him a test. If he ran away, then she had made a wrong decision. If he didn't, then he passed the test. With the money, it wouldn't be difficult for Zhou Xinghong to start his business afresh. And when he found out what were in Gu Ning's raw materials later, he would know what the right choice was. Feeling he was being trusted, Zhou Xinghong was moved. He was an upright man himself. If he had been a malicious man, he would have thought Gu Ning was dumb to trust a stranger. Zhou Xinghong went to sign the contract, and Xiaoping had already left. Gu Ning planned to cut her raw materials out when Qin Yifan and his friends came towards her. Both Qin Yifan and Li Jinjin had a cart with them. In Qin Yifan's cart, there were 2 materials, while in Li Jinjin's cart, there were 3 raw materials. Seeing there were 7 raw materials in Gu Ning's cart, Qin Yifan and his friends were all astonished. Jesus! He had checked for so long to choose these 2. Gu Ning had picked up 7 already. Was she buying expensive raw materials or cheap vegetables? Li Jinjin was amazed too, but then she sneered. Although she knew Gu Ning had a lot of money, she had never seen anyone waste money like that. Gu Ning, are you buying expensive raw materials or cheap vegetables? Qin Yifan found it interesting. I am buying raw materials at the price of cheap vegetables. Gu Ning laughed. She used her jade eyes to scan the raw materials in their carts. Qin Yifan had 1 big and 1 small raw material. The big one was a little bigger than a football. Unfortunately, it was a pure stone. The small one was as big as half a football. There was jade in it, but it was too small and in the size of a baby's fist. Gu Ning judged from the thickness of its fog that it was a high-level jade. But Gu Ning had no intention to tell him. She didn't want to cause herself trouble. As for Li Jinjin, she had 3 raw materials. 2 of them were as big as half a football. One was a pure stone, while the other had a medium-level jade inside. The last was slightly bigger than a football, but it only had a thin layer of green inside. Are you sure you're going to buy them all? Qin Yifan asked with uncertainty. He intended to remind Gu Ning to be careful, but he didn't stop her directly, because no one knew whether there was jade inside or not. If he stopped her, and there was jade in the raw materials, he would have done the wrong thing. Gu Ning would probably hate him for that. Newest tirais at n/vel/b/i/n.co. I already paid the bill, Gu Ning said. What? You already paid? Qin Yifan was shocked again. He didn't expect Gu Ning to be so efficient. "How much did you pay?" he asked. 4.5 million, Gu Ning answered. She stayed calm from the beginning to the end, like 4.5 million was nothing to her. Of course, she knew these raw materials were valuable, or she would not pay that much to buy 7 stones. Although 4.5 million meant nothing to Qin Yifan too, it was still hard for him to spend that large an amount of money on raw materials at one time. "You're really indulging yourself." Qin Yifan didn't know what else to say. "Miss Gu, do you plan to cut them out?" "I'm curious how many of them have jade inside," Li Jinjin said with disdain. Qin Yifan now noticed she was being unkind, and felt displeased. "Jinjin, stone gambling largely relies on one's luck. Even you can't be 100% sure to cut out jade from every raw material with your professional knowledge. Songhua, python stripe and moss aren't the essential marks of a raw material with jade inside," Qin Yifan said plainly. Li Jinjin felt embarrassed. She agreed with what Qin Yifan had said, but she was mad that he stood up for Gu Ning against her. The silent man who followed them all along frowned a little. He was Li Jinjin's older brother. He apparently also felt dissatisfied that Qin Yifan helped Gu Ning. But what Qin Yifan had said wasn't wrong, so Li Jinyu could do nothing but stay quiet. "Well, it seems Miss Li is confident about your ability. Why don't you pick one and compete with mine?" Gu Ning challenged Li Jinjin. She didn't want to be a coward. People around them focused on them at once. No one wanted to miss the bet. Facing the challenge, Li Jinjin couldn't wait to accept it. "No problem. You can use 3 of your raw materials to compete with mine. Whoever can cut out the most valuable jade wins. If no one can cut out jade, then it's even." Li Jinjin was confident there must be 1 raw material with jade among her 3 raw materials. At the same time, she also believed Gu Ning couldn't cut out a single emerald. Even if she had only 1 raw material with jade inside, she would win. Well, Qin Yifan hesitated. They had chosen these raw materials with great care. Although they weren't confident all of them had jade inside, there was a good possibility to cut out jade. And Gu Ning made her choices all by luck. It wasn't dependable. But before he could say something, Gu Ning already accepted. "Very well, but we need to put money in the bet, or it will be boring." "How much?" Li Jinjin asked. Apparently she agreed. "Let's say 10 million yuan, Gu Ning said. "Sure." Li Jinjin answered without hesitation. Li Jinjin accepted Gu Ning's conditions so quickly not because 10 million yuan was nothing to her. Actually, she didn't have that much money herself. She was merely confident that it was impossible for her to lose. Now it was too late for Qin Yifan to stop them. One was his great old friend, the other one was his new friend. He didn't want either of them to lose, thus he could only pray it would be even. From the beginning to the end, Li Jinyu never interfered. He was obviously confident too. Li Jinjin picked a raw material randomly. Gu Ning used her jade eyes to scan it. It was a waste material. Thus Gu Ning chose a waste material too. Although it was a waste material, Gu Ning still paid. There were 2 machines. After Gu Ning and Li Jinjin had paid their bills, 2 workers started to cut the stones. Although Li Jinjin was confident, she paid a lot of attention to Gu Ning's raw material. After 1 cut, there was nothing in it. Then it was the 2nd cut, and still nothing in it. After the 3rd cut, it was still a stone. The raw material had been cut half out without any green. It must be a waste material. Seeing Gu Ning's was a waste material, Li Jinjin felt relieved, but hers was the same, which disappointed her a lot. Well, truckers, that's all for this part. See you soon.